Chapter 316, Last Hope. Nan Gongyu grabbed Gu Liufeng's collar and dragged him back like a small chicken, throwing him in front of He. Then, leaning close to her, he softly whispered, "Reward." He remained silent. Looking over, she saw him with his face turned to the side and staring at her with a look which explicitly demanded that she kisses him. He immediately turned away. Nan Gongyu wasn't annoyed. Instead, he took her into his arms and lightly pecked her on a corner of her mouth, and then with a husky voice, he whispered in her ear, "Princess refused to take the initiative and reward me, so I had to collect it for myself. I had to exert myself and make an effort, I can't lose at all." Scoundrel. He fiercely glared at him, then turned her head away and refused to look at him. However, both of her cheeks were bright crimson. Feng Yunjing saw this scene from where he was standing, and his expression suddenly became gloomy. A cold aura, like a poisonous snake, seemed to circulate within his deep eyes. Ah ah! Suddenly, an ear-piercing scream came from within the medicinal field. The martial artists who'd been unconscious in the medicinal field abruptly started to awaken, one after the other. But the red rash on everyone's faces had morphed into red and purple blood blisters, some people's blisters seeming to grow faster than others. In a moment, the blood blisters continued to swell, and then pop. Next, yellow-red blood flowed down their bodies. Their appearances were even more horrible than the evil spirits that crawled out of hell. The faces of everyone standing outside the medicinal field were full of fear, and they quickly rushed backwards. Some of those who had small guts and a weak tolerance had already started wailing while rushing to the side and vomiting. The medicinal field before their eyes was like a scene of hell on earth. Abruptly, a person whose whole body was decaying, his original appearance unrecognizable, rushed while stumbling towards Feng Lianing. He kneeled down in front of Feng Lianing, hissing and wailing, "Ice Lotus Fairy, save me. I'm Shangguan Rui. You can break the mind confusion scent, you must have a way to heal us. You're also the direct disciple of Thousand Venom Valley's master. No one in the world can save us except for you. I'm begging you." When Shangguan Rui said this, everyone in the medicinal field who had been filled with despair suddenly latched onto those words as their last hope. People immediately surged towards Feng Lianing like a tide, and shouted, "Ice Lotus Fairy, save us." These people were currently unaware of how horrible their appearances were at this moment. Moreover, even after having been alive for so many years, none of them had ever seen such a terrible illness before. Now, they all had the appearances of zombies. It was almost like they'd been sentenced to the death penalty. However, while no one really wanted to die, they also didn't want to live as they were either. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, they would hang on to it at all costs. What's more, who in all of Mi-Luo continent didn't know of Ice Lotus Fairy's reputation? At such a young age she was already a 5th-rank doctor, an intermediate-level member of the Doctors' Association, and a direct disciple of Thousand Venom Valley's master. With her here, maybe they still had a chance. No. With Ice Lotus Fairy here, they would undoubtedly be saved. Feng Lianing saw all of their sinister and disgusting faces, and the fear and loathing in her heart reached extreme levels. She felt like the air was filled with a fishy smell, making her itch to kick these nauseating people away. However, it was at this moment that Wu Yu waved his fan, and raised his voice as he said, "Everyone can rest assured, Ice Lotus Fairy has the heart of a bodhisattva, kind and charitable. When everyone is suffering so terribly, how could she just bear watching? Not to mention, her medical skills are excellent, and she has a crucial position in the Doctors' Association. Naturally, she can find a way to heal you. If even this cannot be done, wouldn't she be ruining her name as Ice Lotus Fairy?" Chapter 317, Recognized Medical Genius. As soon as these words were said, the eyes of those who were kneeling on the ground and begging Feng Lianing revealed their hope. Feng Lianing's face was still pale, and her heart was full of disgust as she looked at these people. However, Wu Yu's words filled her with a high sense of vanity. That's right, she was a rare medical genius that appears once every few centuries in Mi-Luo continent. Whether it was in alchemy or healing, she was much better than the unskilled trash who relied on treacherous methods to profit once or twice. Although these martial artists were disgusting, most of them had extraordinary backgrounds. If she could cure these people in full view of everyone, her prestige in Miluo continent and her position in her family would be significantly enhanced. And in the end, Brother Yu would clearly know who was truly outstanding and deserving of matching him. Feng Lianying's gaze couldn't help but look at Nan Gongyu, yet he didn't see her at all. Instead, he bent his head and spoke with Heshi, acting as if there was nobody else present. Feng Lianing was so angry that her face was distorted, while both of her hands were clenched tightly into fists. Humph. She'll let Brother Yu see that she was the best person and that only she was worthy of the position of Princess of Hell King Manor. With these thoughts, Feng Lianing stepped forward and was about to boast about her medical skills. However, she abruptly heard Feng Yunjing's cold voice say, "Are you sure that you can cure these people? If you're not, then don't show off and lose face for our Feng family." The arrogant look on Feng Lianying's face suddenly transformed into anger. Although her voice was deliberately lower, it was still a bit sharp as she said, "Big brother, you believe that slut, but you don't believe me? Don't forget, I'm a 5th-rank doctor that's recognized as a medical genius under the heavens. Not to mention, big brother, you seem to have forgotten what kind of person my master is, Thousand Venom Valley's master. What kind of poisons haven't I seen before?" Feng Yunjing indifferently glanced at her. "You're certain that you can help them?" Feng Lianying's eyes flashed, and gritting her teeth, she said, "Big brother, don't worry, I've just remembered this illness, and I've seen it in Master's book, the 1000 Poison Record. I clearly recall that there was a solution in there." Feng Lianing spoke with perfect confidence, so it made Feng Yunjing somewhat believe in her. Since this was the case, he retreated several steps and didn't say anything more. If Feng Lianing really had a way to cure this group of people, it'll mean that these people or their masters would all owe a favor to the Feng family. Feng Yunjing would naturally be glad for such an outcome. As Feng Lianing finished speaking, she quickly stepped forward. Her first move was to head towards Shengguan Rui, the 3rd prince of Jinling Kingdom. When Feng Lianing saw the man's face covered in blood blisters and pus, her eyes filled with disgust. In contrast, the look on her face was very kind, gentle, and filled with compassion. "Your Highness 3rd Prince, please rest assured, I will definitely save you all." As soon as she stated this, the surrounding martial artists immediately burst into an enthusiastic cheer. Whether it was the people infected, or those just watching, they all kowtowed in gratitude and praised Feng Lianing as a living Buddha. A haughty and pleased smile hung on Feng Lianying's face as her beautiful eyes swept over everyone. "Lianying is also a part of the cultivation world, so I naturally can't see anyone die without trying to save them. This is my Feng family's constant purpose, you don't have to thank me." After that, she pointed to the martial artist who was still unconscious in the medicinal field. "I'll have to trouble everyone to bring those who are not yet awake and those unable to move in the medicinal field, and place them together in one area." Chapter 318, kindly remind them of course, no one could enter the medicinal field. So after thinking for a minute, the martial artists all summoned tools such as whips, long ropes, and so on, to pull over those in the medicinal field. After these people had pulled over those who were ill from the medicinal field, 2 or 3 more people would carry the ill to a cleared area. The whole time the martial artists were doing this, they were aiming flattering smiles towards Feng Lianing. Heshi couldn't help raising a corner of her mouth and revealing a mysterious smile. Suddenly, Nan Gongyu leaned over to her ear, and softly whispered, "If there's something funny then you better tell me, let your husband be happy too." Heshi glanced at him, too lazy to correct his stupid way of addressing himself, and chuckled, "Guess yourself." Nan Gongyu reached out his hand to poke the tip of her nose, his tone full of affection as he said, "Cheeky. If I guess correctly, then what are you going to give me as a reward?" Wanting another reward. This guy was having too much fun playing around with her, he'll become addicted. Heshi shoved his hand away, then unhappily said, "In your dreams." However, Nangongyu abruptly leaned closer to her ear again, and with a quiet voice slowly said, "This king guesses that the poison will not only infect the ones entering the medicinal field but those who come into contact with the infected." Hearing that, Hashi couldn't help laughing. She had absolutely no sympathy as she watched those enthusiastic martial artists try to curry favor with Feng Lingying. Instead, she smirked and said, "Yeah, I wonder if they'll still praise Ice Lotus Fairy after they find out that they've also been poisoned." Nangongyu saw the playful smile on the corners of Hashi's mouth, the waves of light swirling in her eyes, and smelled her fragrance. Next, his eyes were drawn to her crafty smile, especially those pink and soft lips, with her pearly white teeth. Nangongyu could feel his heart swelling, so reaching out, he took her into his embrace. Then, using one of his wide sleeves to block everyone's line of sight, he kissed her. After a long while, Hashi fiercely pushed him away. Her soft pink lips were slightly red and swollen as she glared angrily at him, her eyes rippling with emotions. "What are you doing when we're in a public place?" Nangongyu gently ran a finger across her long eyelashes, smiling as he said, "Haven't I said it before? This king never makes a losing transaction. Rewards I'm owed must be claimed." Just before Hashi was about to get angry, Nangongyu promptly changed the topic with a two-faced smile on his face. "What do you think, should we kindly remind them?" Hashi was startled at the sudden change in topic and stared blankly at first, then her eyes swiftly swept over everyone from the Lu Li sect before she laughed. Nangongyu was worse than her. However, she rather liked such a personality very much. Under Nangongyu's gaze, Wu Yu quickly started blabbering non-stop. He shouted at the group of people who were carrying the sick people, "Tisk tsk, that blackish blood is so disgusting. Since you've all touched it directly, aren't you afraid your bodies will stink too?" One of them, following Feng Lianying's instructions, and meticulously taking care of their clothes, immediately raised his head and answered back sarcastically, "Saving a life is more important than one's belongings. Ice Lotus Fairy doesn't hesitate to use her spiritual power and her precious medicinal pills to save them, but yet you actually still care about being dirty. If you have a heart of stone like this when seeing those who are about to die, and have no inclination to save them, it's simply not worth you living in this world. Right, right. Those people don't even deserve to carry Ice Lotus Fairy's shoes. You guys clearly don't understand what a noble character is, and what it is to dedicate your life to a worthwhile cause." Voices continuously echoed throughout the medicinal field, making Hashi, who heard it, almost laugh. If these people weren't dressed in ancient attire, she would have thought that she'd returned to the assassin organization of her past life. Chapter 319, Too shameless. Being ridiculed by these people didn't make Wu Yu angry at all, and he instead chuckled. As expected, my good intentions were ignored. Didn't any of you discover that it's only you guys who touched those sick people? If saving them was really that worthwhile, then why didn't even one person from the Lu Li sect move to help? I hope you don't regret your actions later." Feng Lianing was filled with hatred when she heard that, but she didn't look at Wu Yu, instead choosing to look at Hashi standing nearby. "Young Master Shi, it seems like you're slyly trying to create discord in the relationship between everyone and the Lu Li sect. What are your intentions? You don't want everyone to be saved? Or do you want to wait until everyone is dead so you can gain an advantage? Although I knew you were vicious, I didn't expect you to be so vicious in such a situation." When Feng Lianing spat out these words, everyone's angry eyes turned to glare at Hashi. Hashi just leisurely smiled. She had absolutely no intention to respond. Wu Yu, however, sneeringly said, "Obviously it was me who spoke, but why did Ice Lotus Fairy accuse someone else? Rather than glare at me, why don't you take a look at what's happened to the people behind you?" As Wu Yu finished speaking, they all heard a few bangs from behind them. Several people had fainted to the ground. Their faces were flushed, and their bodies were burning hot. Some people even had red rashes on their faces. How is this possible?" the martial artists exclaimed in alarm. These people obviously hadn't entered the medicinal field. It's the pus. The pus on them is contagious. Everybody run, quickly. For a moment, everyone's faces were covered in fear and shock before they all ran away from those who were already sick. The previously ordered scene had once again become chaotic, and there was no one taking care of those who were sick. With their own little lives at risk, what noble character and gaining pleasure from helping others. That was all empty talk. In just a moment, the entire scene was filled with chaos, and the medicinal field was a cacophony of terror. Suddenly, Feng Lianing raised her voice, and indignantly asked, "Young Master Shi, since you knew that this disease was contagious, why didn't you say something earlier? That would have prevented more people from being infected, right?" He Shi looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. "I thought you knew that. After all, aren't you a fifth-rank doctor? How could I dare to meddle in your affairs and tell you what to do?" Feng Lianing clenched her teeth, hatred gleaming in her eyes. Human life is immeasurable. How could what happened before cause you to have a grudge against me and neglect so many people's lives? I was busy thinking about how to treat everyone's ailments. Naturally, I couldn't worry about so much at one time. But, young Master Shi, you obviously knew yet you didn't say it. For what purpose? Are the lives of these 100-odd people less important to you than your personal grudge? After Feng Lianing spoke, everyone suddenly looked at He Shi with gazes full of contempt and resentment. Especially those people whose friends and relatives had fallen unconscious. They didn't even know if they themselves were infected or not, so they felt even more hatred towards He Shi. They had all drawn out their long swords as they itched to rush forwards and kill her. Wu Yu was simply amazed at Feng Lianying's ability to deliberately distort the truth. Previously, he was unaware of why Gu Lufeng and his princess hated Feng Lianying so much. After all, he'd only met Feng Lianying a few times, yet, he also knew that she liked his own master. But now, he'd seen the reason. She was a treacherous and vicious woman. She was simply too shameless. Chapter 320, Strange Blood Poison, TSK. You say that as if I hadn't reminded all of you a moment ago, but did any of you guys listen to me? Wu Yu raised his voice, his tone filled with ridicule. Weren't you all the ones who'd previously said that you wanted to selflessly help the sick, with no regards to your own safety? Now that there's danger, you blame us for not reminding you. Your words are just like farts. Everyone was dumbfounded. They had just been about to charge at He Shi in anger when they'd abruptly stopped. But even though they'd stopped, their expressions were all still extremely ugly. Wu Yu lightly chuckled once again. Furthermore, was Ice Lotus Fairy really unaware that this sickness was contagious? After I said something, if she really didn't know, then why wasn't even one person from the Luli sect moving to help? In the end, the only ones who were infected were all of you who were helping. Why you? Don't talk nonsense. Feng Lianying's body was trembling due to anger. She almost couldn't help but want to attack. However, she was stopped by Feng Yunjing. His icy gaze swept over the skeptical expressions on everyone's faces, and he coldly said, "First, save those who are infected, then we'll talk about it again. There are other more important things to do than speak skillfully. There is nothing to argue about." Those who were dissatisfied after listening to Wu Yu immediately quietened under Feng Yunjing's glare. Their complexions paled, and they felt alarmed. Even those who still had doubts didn't dare think about it again. This was the power and prestige of a young master from the Feng family, and the spiritual pressure of a nascent soul-stage martial artist. Feng Lianing took a deep breath, her face regaining its refined and noble look before she slowly walked up to Shengguan Rui. Waving her fingers, she quickly formed a sealing technique. Following that, blue spiritual power representing the water attribute entered Shengguan Rui's body. Water attribute and wood attribute spiritual powers were special spiritual attributes unique to high-ranked doctors. Although martial artists with other spiritual roots could also practice medical techniques, it would be challenging for them to attain a high rank. Wood represented life, while water represented healing. For a doctor, the wood attribute spiritual power was of a higher rank. However, when those with the water attribute wanted to advance a doctor rank, it was twice as hard when compared to those with a wood attribute. When everyone saw Feng Lianying's ball of water spiritual power, they couldn't help but gasp in surprise. Although her water attribute's spiritual power wasn't of the highest rank, you could tell from its rich spiritual power that it was extremely pure. Feng Lianying used her water attribute to envelope Shangguan Rui, conducting a detailed examination of his body. Then, a flash of understanding lit up her eyes and a corner of her mouth raised in a proud smile. After the examination, she was confident that her guess was correct. What these people were suffering from was a strange poison recorded in her master's book, the 1000 Poison Record. Her fingers waved once more, and the people watching were dazzled as the spiritual power that had entered Shangguan Rui's body returned to Feng Lianying. This gorgeous movement caused everyone's admiration of Feng Lianying to increase. Their eyes were brimming with hope and expectation as they looked at her. After Feng Lianying retrieved her spiritual power, she revealed a confident smile and slowly said, "I have a diagnosis of your condition. It's a poison called intoxicated blood, which is an incredibly rare and strange poison. It normally only appears in the desert of the far north, so I don't know why it would appear in 100 herb mist. However, please rest assured that I already know what the cure to this poison is. The antidote is a 5 elements blood coagulation pill made from purple monkey flowers, pomegranate fire fruit, and dragon grass. The herbs needed for this kind of medicine are extremely unique and hard to find in the world. Fortunately, I have plenty 5 elements blood coagulation pills refined by my master, so I'm now able to detoxify the poison in everyone's bodies." Chapter 321, Are You Guidao? Feng Lianying's face was full of arrogance and pride as her delicate hands slowly fished out a bottle of medicine. Then, she poured out a 5 elements blood coagulation pill and gave it to Shangguan Rui. In less time than it takes to burn a stick of incense, Shangguan Rui, who'd initially been on the verge of dying, had started to regain his vitality. His body that had been festering, with pus continuously flowing down it like a stream, slowly stopped rotting. Even the pus-filled wounds started closing. Shangguan Rui's face was filled with joy. He had miraculously managed to return from death's door. Kneeling in front of Feng Lianying, he said with a trembling voice, I feel my spiritual power gradually coming back, and the burning-like pain in my internal organs is also slowly disappearing. Ice Lotus Fairy, your medical skills are really unparalleled. I, Shangguan Rui, will never forget your kindness." As he uttered those words, an enthusiastic cheer burst forth from the crowd. One by one, they all yelled, "Ice Lotus Fairy," and they gazed at her like they were looking at a goddess delivering salvation. They were all filled with admiration and gratefulness. When Heshi saw this scene before her, she couldn't help but laugh lightly at Nan Gongyu's side. "Look at how your little sister Lianying is worshipped. It seems like she still has an infatuation with you too. All this time, she hasn't once forgotten to cast flirtatious glances towards you, yet you aren't moved at all. Such a heartless little girl." Nan Gongyu reached out his hand and pinched her elegant little nose, unhappily saying, "Who's my little sister Lianying? In this world, there's only a Nalan Heshi who's mine, understand? In the future, if you say something incorrectly again, then don't blame this king for punishing you." Heshi's face was bright red as she swat his misbehaving hand away, and she wanted to pay him back. Suddenly, she heard an exclamation from a Hell King Manor bodyguard. "Master, young Master Shi. Look at that, it looks like someone is approaching." From the direction of the hill, there were 2 silhouettes unexpectedly staggering towards them. The faces of these 2 men were also covered in blood blisters. It was a horrible sight to behold. One of them hadn't even made it out of the medicinal field before he fell to the ground and howled with grief, never to get up again. The other man ran out of the medicinal field while swaying from side to side, incessantly shouting, "Help!" However, when the man's eyes fell on the unconscious form of Gu Lufeng, he seemed to have forgotten all his pain and fear, and his screams were now full of worry. "Lufeng, what happened to you?" Seeing that the man was about to charge towards Gu Lufeng, the bodyguards of Hell King Manor used their long swords to block his way threateningly. The man looked up in alarm and saw a group of people staring at him coldly. He couldn't help trembling as he asked, who are you people? What did you do to Lufeng? Wu Yu waved his fan, arrogantly looking at him as he asked, and who are you? What is your relationship with Gu Lufeng? Don't you know that if you get close to him, you will infect him with the poison on your body? The man's eyes filled with fear and despair. The blood blisters on his face were even starting to pop one after another, causing his entire face to look horrifying. He suddenly frowned. Are you Guidao? How do you know my name? He didn't say anything more. Instead, squatting down, she took out a bottle of medicine and waved it under Gu Liufeng's nose. Gu Liufeng's brows creased tightly, and he quickly awoke. However, he had barely returned to consciousness, and before he could adjust his energy and restore his physical strength, he immediately shouted, let me go save him. I don't believe that he's dead. Wu Yu patted Gu Liufeng's shoulder to appease him, and said, first, calm down. Do you see who this person is? Chapter 322, The Beginning of a Nightmare. Lufeng. Are you okay? Guidao's voice was hoarse, and he kept releasing painful groans. Fortunately, you're alright, at least, there's someone who'll take care of Yulan. Gu Lufeng looked at the man lying on the ground, barely able to recognize his face. After staring blankly for a few minutes, he finally whispered back, your uncle. You didn't die. As he said that, Gu Lufeng went to rush towards him, only to be stopped by He. Don't touch him, you'll be infected. Hearing that his poison really was contagious to Gu Lufeng, Guidao propped himself up with his hand on the ground and moved backwards several steps before he cried sorrowfully, Lufeng, uncle is already past the point of helping, don't come over. In the future, take good care of your mother, and live well, uncle, don't talk nonsense. Gu Lufeng suddenly raised his voice. You've just been poisoned by an insignificant and strange poison, why would you die? Didn't I tell you to leave Murong Zhangfeng and them behind when you entered the secret territory, and to wait for me in Greenwood Realm? Why didn't you listen to me, and instead followed them into 100 Herb Mist? Guidao's eyes were somewhat blank before they then filled with fear and pain. In the end, he just lightly sighed, and said, I was in too much of a rush. Guidao's younger sister, Gu Yulan, who was also Gu Liufeng's mother, was seriously ill. After having received treatment for so many years, she still showed no signs of recovery. Instead, she was gradually reaching her limit. Gu Lufeng and Guidao were desperate and had decided to take a chance on the secret territory of the Sealed Dragon Domain. After all, the owner of the Sealed Dragon Domain, Master Zijin, was once a person with an outstanding reputation regarding his medical skills. Furthermore, 100 Herb Mist was filled with high-level spiritual plants rare to Luo continent. Guidao was a gold core stage martial artist, and a bodyguard of Murong Manor. This, together with a map of the secret territory he had in his possession that was handed down from generation to generation, he was able to enter 100 Herb Mist through the major cloud array. After arriving at Greenwood Realm, Guidao hadn't been able to wait until Gu Lufeng arrived, and had followed the Murong family into the medicinal field. Once they all saw the endless amount of high-level spiritual plants in the medicinal field, they were nearly overcome with madness. However, some of the people who couldn't help but consume those herbs found that afterwards, their bodies were covered in a strange red rash. Guidao gazed at the medicinal field, the expression in his eyes becoming one of terror and anger. Back then, half of the 29 people we came in with showed symptoms of being poisoned. But at that time, no one panicked because we had Murong Hai with us, a third-rank doctor. He gave everyone an elixir, and after taking the medicine, everyone's temperature quickly went down. On top of that, the red rashes disappeared without a trace. We all thought that that was the end of our trouble, but who would have thought that it was just the beginning of our nightmare? Guidao clenched his teeth, then continued, not long after taking the medicine, the martial artists who'd originally had the red rashes suddenly began to bleed from the 7 apertures, of their faces. Eventually, their bodies were completely rotten, until they were nothing but pools of blood. Unfortunately, our nightmare was far from over. After half of them had died, the rest of us, besides Murong Hai and Murong Zhangfeng, also started to experience the symptoms of a fever. Now, it's definite that we were infected due to coming into contact with those who were poisoned. When Gui Dao said that, an extremely pained expression crossed his face, and his body twitched violently. The blood blisters on his face were festering with a speed visible to the naked eye, while black and yellow bloody pus leaked out from his body. His current appearance was horrendous. This appearance was due to Gui Dao suffering from the final stages of the poison. Soon, he would meet with a violent death. 1. Both eyes, both nostrils, both ears, and the mouth. Chapter 323, Ridicule. However, he continuously kept shouting at Gu Lufeng, "Don't come near me, live well, Lufeng, live well." The inside of Gu Liufeng's mask had long since become damp with tears. Regardless of everything, he still wanted to shake off Wu Yu and rush over to his uncle. However, Heshi was faster than him and scattered a handful of white powder into the air. The white powder landed on Gui Dao's body, and soon, it was absorbed into his flesh. Though the wounds showed no change, Gui Dao's painful wailing silenced, and his body stopped twitching. Heshi looked at Gu Lufeng, and indifferently said, "This powder can only temporarily stop the poison from invading his heart, it won't last long." Gu Lufeng stared blankly at Heshi, then he suddenly fell to his knees. "Shiyu, can you save him? As long as you save him, my life is yours." Heshi's expression was somewhat grave, and while her voice came out indifferently cold like normal, it had a slight calming effect. "Even if I can save him, my method of healing people is different compared to other doctors. Moreover, it's extremely likely that your uncle will suffer from a great amount of pain. Even then, do you still want me to save him?" But before Gu Lufeng could answer, a soft voice interrupted. "Young Master Gu, I hope you won't take offense, but you can take one of my 5 elements blood coagulation pills for your uncle." Gu Lufeng turned around and saw Feng Lianying looking back at him with a smile spread across her face. Feng Lianying's expression was filled with arrogance as if she was enjoying watching other people's misfortune. Slightly raising her chin, she said, "Previously, it was young Master Gu who injured me, but it was only because Shiyu bewitched you. I believe that it wasn't intentional. As long as you're willing to sincerely repent, I will naturally save your uncle's life. After all, saving a life is the noble thing to do, and on top of that, I don't want to see you heartbroken." How does that sound? Standing beside Feng Lianying, Nie Jinchen couldn't help but laugh as he said, "Gu Lufeng, you can't really think that everyone has little sister Lianying's strength and will be capable of saving your uncle's life, right? Don't make the wrong choice and cause harm to your uncle, you'll regret it all your life. If you have any self-consciousness left, then obediently come here and apologize by kowtowing to little sister Lianying. After that, we will kindly help you. How about it?" Feng Lianying glanced at Nie Jingchen, as if she was trying to censure him, then slowly said, "Maybe young master Shi really does have a way to cure people? Although he's just on foundation establishment stage and doesn't have a doctor's rank." Nie Jinchen burst into laughter and said, "As if that waste has a way to cure people, he's just talking rubbish. Now that he sees that you, little sister Lianying, have the limelight, he's unsatisfied. There's no need for you to defend such a vicious person." "That's right. How can trash that would be so daring as to deceive everyone be compared with Ice Lotus Fairy? This young master, if you really want to save your uncle, you'd better come and apologize to Ice Lotus Fairy. Really, all kinds of trash are daring to impersonate being a doctor nowadays. This kind of person is simply not even worthy of carrying Ice Lotus Fairy's shoes." One after another, comments were shouted through the medicinal field. Everyone was ridiculing Heshi for overestimating her capabilities. Heshi stopped Nangong Yu, who was filled with rage and ready to teach them a lesson, and coldly laughed as she whispered in his ear, Nangong Yu stared blankly. Then, following that, he poked the tip of her nose and laughed with an indulging expression on his face. At this moment, Feng Lianying saw the interaction between the two of them, and her face twisted in fury. After a few deep breaths, she managed to restrain her rage, and said, "Young Master Gu, have you thought it over? In just a few minutes it'll be too difficult to save your uncle." Chapter 324, I believe in you, or, will you kill your uncle for your selfishness? Gu Lufeng closed his eyes, and when they opened again, they were calm and tranquil. "I've made my decision." Nie Jinchen laughed and said, "Since you've thought about it, why don't you hurry up and kowtow to little sister Lianing, acknowledging your mistake?" However, before Nie Jinchen could finish speaking, Gu Lufeng had already stood up. Then, looking straight at Heshi, he slowly said, "Please, cure my uncle." Heshi raised an eyebrow, and a glint of surprise flashed in her eyes. "Have you properly considered everything? I don't have a doctor's rank, and I'm not a member of the Doctors' Association." Without the slightest hesitation, Gu Lufeng responded, "I believe in you." Looking at this scene, Nie Jinchen's words of humiliation and ridicule seemed to be stuck in his throat. His entire face was flushed red, and it was a long while before he exclaimed, "Gu Lufeng, are you insane? You actually believe that lying stinky brat who doesn't have any achievements? After you cause your uncle's death, you'll regret this decision." The faces of the other people in the medicinal field were all showing their disapproval, and they gazed at Gu Lufeng like they were looking at an idiot. This man would rather reject Ice Lotus Fairy, a 5th-rank doctor, and instead chose to believe a boy only on foundation establishment stage. Seeing the resolute gaze of Gu Lufeng, a corner of Heshi's mouth lifted into a slight smirk. "In that case, then I need you go into the medicinal field to pick up some herbs such as purple monkey flower, pomegranate fire fruit, and dragon grass." As soon as she said this, everyone was in an uproar. My God, did I just hear it correctly? Did he just say to pick herbs from the medicinal field? Doesn't he know those herbs are poisonous and that whoever eats them will die? This is what saving people looks like. It's clearly wanting to kill people. Not to mention, the herbs he just named are the same ones as Ice Lotus Fairy. This clearly means that he doesn't understand anything. He's just copying the diagnosis and prescription of Ice Lotus Fairy. This guy is just too shameless. The surrounding was filled with noise, yet Heshi's expression didn't change in the slightest, she merely watched Gu Lufeng with a relaxed gaze. Gu Lufeng looked at his uncle who was now unconscious yet still groaning, and clenched his teeth as he said, "Okay, I'll go." Insane. This guy must be insane. Entering the medicinal field is equal to courting death. Did that beautiful boy deceive him? How could he make such a decision? I know about the one who wears the mask, he's the boss of Xingda Hall, young Master Gu. With his shrewd intelligence, how could he unequivocally believe the boy's words yet not believe in Ice Lotus Fairy to help? Perhaps he was seduced by the boy's pretty face, so he doesn't even care about his uncle's safety. Ha ha ha, Gu Lufeng angrily grit his teeth, and in a flash, he entered the medicinal field. He was a person who ran a pharmacy, so even though some herbs such as purple monkey flower, pomegranate fire fruit, and dragon grass were uncommon, he could still recognize them easily. Soon, he had used jade boxes to hold a lot of these 3 kinds of herbs and brought them in front of Heshi. When he came out of the medicinal field, Gu Liufeng's forehead was covered in fine layer of sweat, but his gaze was extremely resolute. At this time, Feng Lianying's concerned voice was heard from afar. "Young Master Gu, since you entered the medicinal field, it's very likely that you've already been infected with the intoxicated blood poison. You should quickly take one of my 5 elements blood coagulation pills. I don't want you to kowtow and admit your mistake, I just hope that you and your uncle stay alive. After all, we're doctors, we must have benevolent hearts and be charitable in deeds. How could I act like young Master Shi, and treat a patient's life as a trifling matter in order to show off?" Chapter 325, Domineering Behavior. Feng Lianing thought that her words were reasonable, refined, and full of integrity. The martial artists nearby who were unaware of her true thoughts expressed their approval. Ice Lotus Fairy really is as kind-hearted as the rumors say. She's such a compassionate person. Ice Lotus Fairy must have been sent from the ninth heaven. She came to deliver us salvation. That brat has no medical ethics. With the way he disregards human life, he shouldn't be allowed to leave the medicinal field alive. Feng Lianing felt like her body was emitting a holy light, and looked down at Gu Lufeng with pity. However, she hadn't expected that Gu Lufeng would merely glance coldly at her, and without a trace of politeness, say, "Life and death are determined by fate, there's no need for Ice Lotus Fairy's concern. Not to mention, I feel nauseous just from looking at such a loathsome woman like you, who acts like a white lotus on the outside but is rotten on the inside. If I had to be saved by you, I would rather die in little Yuer's hands." After that, he turned his head away and wholly ignored Feng Lianing. Feng Lianing was shaking all over due to her rage. As she looked at He and Gu Lufeng, her gaze filled with her desire to kill them and crush their bones into dust. At this time, after receiving the herbs, He didn't refine them into medicine as everyone expected. Rather, after releasing a strange ball of fire spiritual power, she then began to directly roast the herbs. As the fire's spiritual power burned the three herbs, the spiritual energy within the spiritual plants began to slowly be absorbed by the fire's spiritual power. With the herbs starting to melt, the originally fresh and tender herbs soon dried up to resemble stalks of grass. What is he doing? He's actually sucked the spiritual energy out of the herbs. What effect will be left in the herbs if he does that? He's obviously pretending to know what he's doing. He wanted to imitate Ice Lotus Fairy and save people, but he's unable to refine even the most basic medicine. Now he's lost face. Even if there is a problem with the herbs in this medicinal field, doing things like this to the herbs is too wasteful. That kind of person thinks he deserves to be called a doctor. How can young Master Gu believe him? He turned a deaf ear to everything around her. With the help of Gu Lufeng and Wu Yu, she quickly produced a medicinal liquid. After decocting the herbs, He came to stand beside Guidao. The silver needles in her hand flew like shadows and pierced several of Guidao's major acupuncture points. As the silver needles entered Guidao's acupuncture points, spiritual power began to leak from his body. Guidao's body that had been originally weak, at this moment, due to the loss of spiritual power, weakened until the breaths leaving his mouth were like dying gasps. Seeing his uncle's weak appearance, he eventually couldn't help asking, "Shiyu, my uncle, can he be saved?" Currently, He was confirming whether Guidao's spiritual power was drained. Having heard what was asked, she laughed proudly and slowly said, "There is no end to the medical techniques I can use, but I don't dare to say that I can cure all the world's ailments. Yet, if I say that I can cure someone, then even if it's King Yama, he won't be taking their life. And you guys," her gaze landed on Gu Lufeng, Wu Yu, and Qing Long, "it would be enough if all of you just shut up." Gu Lufeng, Wu Yu, Qing Long, Wu Yu and Qing Long, "Princess is too domineering. She's really a perfect match for Master." Nangong Yu caressed Hexi's hair, lightly chuckling as he said, "This king likes such domineering behavior. She really is worthy of being the woman this king fancies." Hexi responded to him with two efficient words. "Get lost dash." The perfectly concocted medicinal liquid was soon poured into Guidao's mouth, and after he drank the medicine, his expression suddenly twisted into one of extreme pain. His body, which was already weak, suddenly twitched violently on the ground. Guidao's skin, which was initially only slightly festering, not only didn't heal, it instead started sprouting blackish blood blisters. Chapter 326, Believe in him to the end. For a moment, only Guidao's ear-piercing screams could be heard throughout the medicinal field, drowning out the cries of the other infected people. Everyone was silent while they looked at Guidao's miserable appearance. Their faces were covered in horror and sympathy. Then, such silence was only momentary, as soon the medicinal field broke out into even more emotional discussions than before. "It's awful. Fortunately, it's not that brat that'll treat us, but Ice Lotus Fairy. Otherwise, we'll end up like that too. Yeah, he obviously could have been saved before, but now, his life, who told young Master Gu to not and believe Ice Lotus Fairy, but to believe in that kid who has yet to mature. I wonder if he's happy now that his uncle has been killed. A quack. He's a quack that harms people. The anger from those watching was like a tide that rose and fell in continuous succession, and as it mixed with Guidao's pained howls, it caused Gu Liufeng's hands to clench into tight fists at his sides. He couldn't bear to watch his uncle suffer through such torment, but reason told him to trust Shiyu. Since he'd promised to believe in him, he must believe in him to the end. Gu Lufeng closed his eyes. His complexion deathly pale as his body trembled slightly. The one person in the medicinal field that wasn't affected by the screaming was probably only Heshi. Her expression was calm as she asked Nan Gongyu for a length of heaven silk, and then used it to tie Guidao up to prevent him from further struggling. Then, she took out her silver needles and crouching down, popped the black blood blisters on Guidao's body one by one. The black liquid slowly seeped out of the popped blood blisters, emitting a stench that could make anyone feel nauseous. And as it flowed out of the wounds, it resulted in Heshi's fingertips becoming slightly stained. Yet, it was precisely that pus that could infect people. However, Heshi's expression didn't change at all. Using water's spiritual power, she focused it into a fine spray that landed on Guidao's body, washing clean all of the wounds. After all the wounds had been cleaned, Guidao slipped into a coma. Yet even unconscious, he still released pained groans. Heshi looked at Gu Lufeng and indifferently said, "It's done. I predict that he'll be fine after half an hour." Gu Lufeng was startled at first, before his expression immediately turned into one of excitement. His feet staggered due to having been standing so rigidly this whole time, and he almost fell to the ground. Heshi retreated to the side, but one of her small hands was instantly captured by Nan Gongyu. Before Heshi could react, Nan Gongyu grabbed her hand and gently pressed the back of it against his lips, and that was precisely the area that had been stained with Guidao's blood. Heshi raised her eyebrows and whispered, "Didn't you see that I was just touching pus and blood? It was contagious. Aren't you afraid that you'll get infected?" The expression on Nan Gongyu's face remained calm, while his eyes were gentle as he looked at her. If Xi'er was infected, then this king would happily share the same fate as his princess. "Who's your princess?" Heshi unhappily retrieved her hand, but a corner of her mouth raised as she explained, "The pus in Guidao's body is no longer contagious, but you've already guessed that, right?" Hearing that, Nan Gongyu snorted, "If I had thought that it posed any danger to you, Xi'er, do you think that I would have let you save him regardless of your safety?" Heshi didn't speak and instead turned her head away. This guy is as overbearing as always, his desire to be in control is too strong. However, while this scene was happening around Heshi, the people on the other side who were still watching Shengguan Rui's condition had complete faith in Feng Lianing. Guidao remained unconscious, with pain visible on his face. Although the blood and pus on his wounds had been cleaned up, the festering wounds still existed. Occasionally, black and yellow liquid would leak out, looking rather wretched. Chapter 327, Begging for an Antidote. Watching Shengguan Rui, who had eaten the 5 elements blood coagulation pill, they could see that he was now breathing as steadily as a normal person, that he could stand and walk normally, and that the wounds on his body had begun to heal. Comparing both sides, Feng Lianying's medical skills were more advanced than Heshi's. Consequently, everyone sneered at Heshi and Gu Lufeng, enjoying their misfortune as they asked Feng Lianying for a 5 elements blood coagulation pill for themselves. However, although Feng Lianying had a lot of 5 elements blood coagulation pills, it was impossible for her to supply it to everyone. This meant that many poisoned martial artists could only helplessly watch their bodies festering, without the opportunity to be cured. "Ice Lotus Fairy, I beg you, give me a blood coagulation pill, my brother is going to die." Someone kneeling in front of Feng Lianying was piteously entreating her before they were soon kicked away by someone else. "Who do you think you are? You're merely a rogue cultivator, 1. Without any sect or clan, but you dare to ask Ice Lotus Fairy to waste a precious 5 elements blood coagulation pill on you? Don't dream. Such weak people like you guys originally shouldn't have entered 100 Herb Mist. Now that you've come here to die, blame your own bad fate, don't blame others. That's right, if low martial artists like you guys are going to die, then just die, why fight over medicinal pills with us? Ice Lotus Fairy, I am the disciple of Black Ice Clan's great elder, from Hao country. We, the Black Ice Clan, and the Luli sect, have always been on good terms. Please give me the antidote. Feng Lianing looked at the person who was currently kneeling at her feet and trying to win her favor as they begged for an antidote, and the pride on her face couldn't be concealed. This kind of worship and the feeling of holding someone else's life in the palm of your hand was wonderful. There were only 2 bottles of 5 elements blood coagulation pills in her hands, so naturally, she couldn't assign them to those who had no sect or clan. They were of no assistance to the Feng family or her reputation. Soon, all of the 5 elements blood coagulation pills had been divided, with most of them being given to the children of influential families or the elite disciples of large sections. While those who didn't manage to receive the medicine were forcibly banished to the side by disciples of the Luli sect, to prevent the infection from spreading. Those people huddled together, the excitement on their faces had long since disappeared to be replaced with despair. Someone couldn't help shouting, Ice Lotus Fairy, don't you have any compassion in your heart that allows you to take pity on our lives? Why are you only saving powerful people, but ignoring us? Exactly. You're unworthy of your name, you faker. So if the martial artists who are children of influential families are worth saving, don't tell me, our lives are unworthy. Wah, who will save my father? However, those people's curses and protests were halted by a fierce attack technique from the disciples of the Luli sect. If anyone dares to slender Ice Lotus Fairy again, I'll let him die now. Since all of you are in this condition, just blame yourselves for overestimating your capabilities and having delusions of getting your hands on the herbs in the medicinal field. As you've all fallen to such a state, you only have yourselves to blame. These people's hearts were full of desperation, but unfortunately, they were powerless to do anything. They could only silently bear the ridicule from the children of influential families, and watch as one by one, they took a 5 elements blood coagulation pill from Ice Lotus Fairy's hand, while they could only wait to die. However, just when those people had all received a 5 elements blood coagulation pill and were about to swallow them, a sudden scream was heard. Shangguan Rui, standing behind Feng Lianing, was releasing an ear-piercing scream. It looked like Shangguan Rui's face that had already healed, at this moment, was being squeezed by a force from inside of his body, making his entire face continuously distort and deform. 1. Rogue cultivators, literally translates as loose cultivators. Independent cultivators are unaffiliated with any sect, clan, or other martial organizations. Chapter 328. Exploded. Shangguan Rui's face was filled with fright and pain, and his body kept rolling about on the ground. The blood blisters that had already disappeared were now reappearing extremely fast. However, it was far from over. When everyone was at a loss of what to do, a loud bang was suddenly heard from Shangguan Rui as his body unexpectedly exploded. Black pus and blood splattered everywhere, and even 2 disciples of the Luli sect weren't spared. It was too late for them to flee and they ended up splashed with blood. After the explosion, everyone looked at the place where Shangguan Rui had been reclining. Finding that there was no dead body or bones, just a large pool of blood. The most terrible thing was that the blood seemed to be alive as it struggled to squirm towards the crowd. For a moment, everyone was shocked by the incredible scene before their eyes. It was only after a long while that someone finally screamed, their expression one of horror as they ran away. When the blood neared where Heshi and the others were, a man in black clothes slowly stepped forward with an indifferent expression on his face. Opening a porcelain bottle he held in his hand, he then poured a medicinal liquid onto the blood. The blood violently bubbled, and with an almost pained sound, it seemed to want to flee. This medicinal liquid was like the blood's nemesis, it desperately wanted to escape, but it was powerless to do anything. After a short time, the blood disappeared in a plume of steam. Everyone stared blankly at the scene. They just couldn't believe their own eyes. Shangguan Rui, he actually exploded. Moreover, he turned into a pool of blood? What did that mean? Did it mean that the 5 elements blood coagulation pill was ineffective at curing Shangguan Rui, and had killed him instead? That meant that Ice Lotus Fairy was incapable of treating those infected with poison. Instead, the 5 elements blood coagulation pill that everyone had been fighting over just moments before was actually a poison that would kill them. Arg! Some of the martial artists let out terrified screams as they started throwing the pill, which had been so hard to get, as far away from them as possible like a hot potato. However, several of them who'd already swallowed a 5 elements blood coagulation pill went completely pale, and with their bodies twitching, they dug their fingers down their throats to vomit the pill out. Since they'd swallowed a 5 elements blood coagulation pill, then didn't that mean they would become like Shangguan Rui and ultimately turn into a pool of blood after suffering a violent death? No dash. That was impossible dash. They didn't want to die. Feng Lianing, didn't you say that the 5 elements blood coagulation pill would definitely cure us? Then what on earth happened to Shangguan Rui? You vicious woman, you lied to get me to take a 5 elements blood coagulation pill. If I die, my master will never let you go. What Ice Lotus Fairy? She's nothing but a swindler posing as a medical genius, pa. Feng Lianing, if my senior brother dies, my Ling Shao sect will refuse to ever be allies with you. Feng Lianying's face had currently turned a horrid shade of green and purple. She couldn't at all believe what had just happened. Shangguan Rui had actually died. Impossible. It was simply impossible. Her diagnosis, her medicine, how could any of it be wrong? It must be that Shangguan Rui was infected by another poison, right? That's right, the problem must have come from Shangguan Rui himself. With this thought, Feng Lianing suddenly shouted, the problem isn't my medical skills, and my diagnosis wasn't wrong. This was just an unexpected tragedy caused by Shangguan Rui's own problem. If you don't believe me, try it again. The next person won't suffer from such a situation. Chapter 329, Mad, the 5 elements blood coagulation pill is definitely the cure for intoxicated blood poison. However, how could any of those people still believe her, and they indignantly shouted, you want us to try again? Do you want us to end up as miserable as Shangguan Rui? Keep dreaming. Feng Lianing was furious after hearing all the accusations and watched as the martial artists from influential families refused to eat the 5 elements blood coagulation pill, while those who'd already swallowed them forcefully vomited them out. Feng Lianing suddenly took out an additional 3 pills that she'd hidden inside her sleeve for bargaining with in the future. Then, she rushed towards the martial artists without influence. The group of banished martial artists had initially been rejoicing that they'd escaped from such a calamity, but now that they saw Feng Lianing rushing over, they immediately screamed and fled in all directions. At this moment, Feng Lianing had completely lost all traces of sanity. Wearing heavenly silk gloves on her hands, she grabbed a person, and then stuffed a 5 elements blood coagulation pill into his mouth as she murmured, there won't be any problem, my diagnosis will never be wrong. In order to speed up the effect of the 5 elements blood coagulation pill, she even forced some of her spiritual power into that person's body. This would cause the medicine to be rapidly absorbed, regardless of the impurities in the pill that might cause harm to the martial artist. However, after the period it takes an incense stick to burn, Feng Lianing quickly retreated in horror. With a loud bang, another person exploded and turned into a pool of blood that squirmed about on the ground. Ah! Dead! Dead again! Shinner dash! Feng Lianing, you vicious woman, return my son's life. Shinner! The martial artist's mother saw the pool of blood that used to be her son, and with her eyes red due to hatred, she charged towards Feng Lianing. However, her cultivation base was nowhere near good enough for her to be an opponent with Lu Li Sec's bodyguards, and she was quickly kicked to the ground, causing her to spit out blood. The group of powerless martial artists were now alarmed, and they glared at Feng Lianying with hatred and resentment. This woman, in their eyes, had been as beautiful and as pure as a goddess in the heavens. Now, she'd revealed herself to be a ruthless and viciously evil woman. What's the use of calling such a woman Ice Lotus Fairy? It's simply insulting the title of a fairy. At this moment, Guidao, who'd remained unconscious on the ground the whole time, groaned and slowly opened his eyes. Gu Liufeng's face filled with surprise. Quickly helping to support his uncle sit up, he asked, "How are you feeling, uncle? Do you feel better now?" Guidao bared his teeth and frowned, but eventually, he stretched his lips into a smile. "You can rest assured, Lu Feng, I feel much better now." He crouched down and grabbed his wrist to take his pulse before nodding. "The poison in your body has been completely expelled, while your wounds are no longer weeping pus. You can now use your spiritual power to assist in healing your wounds." Sure enough, Guidao's wounds were now only leaking healthy red blood, whereas previously they'd been oozing a black-yellow liquid. Guidao bit his lip, as though he was suffering from pain, and he slowly began to circulate his spiritual power to nourish the wounds on his body. A moment later, the wounds that had slowly been trickling blood dried up. Although it wasn't possible for them to completely heal right away, his body seemed to be in a much better condition than it was before, and he could even see again. Guidao looked at the wounds he'd sustained that were no longer bleeding. His body trembled slightly, and he stared gratefully at He. I didn't think that I'd survive. I thought I would have died already." Chapter 330, Why? The rims of Gu Liufeng's eyes slightly reddened and glinted as he looked at He, his voice hoarse. "Shiyu, I don't know how to thank you. Anyway, if you need something in the future, Gu Lufeng won't hesitate to brave any danger for you, without a word of complaint." "Rubbish. Didn't you help me before?" While speaking, He threw a bottle of medicine to him and indifferently said, "Applying this to his wounds can help speed up the healing. However, these wounds are a bit unusual, so they might not disappear within a month." The meaning of her words meant that she didn't accept Gu Liufeng's promise to give her his life for saving Guidao's life. At most, what she'd done was only repay the favor she owed Gu Lufeng. Moreover, the words, "We're friends, aren't we?" that Gu Lufeng had previously said remained in her mind. Friends? She didn't quite understand the meaning of this word though. A smile reached Gu Liufeng's eyes, and he finally recovered his usual languid and graceful expression. He took the medicine bottle and smiled lightly. "Unexpectedly, saving your life has turned into one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life." The atmosphere around He and Gu Lufeng was very harmonious. However, Nangong Yu watching from the side had a dark and gloomy expression on his face. He recalled that in Zijin Palace He had faced him with a cold scowl as if she would off all relations with him. This made his heart pound with fear, so for a moment, he didn't dare do anything too rash. Nonetheless, Qing Long noticed his master's gloomy expression. So, quietly coughing, he stepped forward and said, "Young Master Shi, your medical skills are indeed amazing, but we still have many things that we don't understand. Even though the ingredients for your medicine and Feng Lianying's were the same, how come Guidao survived, while Shengguan Rui became a pool of blood?" "Yeah, you're right." Wu Yu also moved closer, his face filled with a smug excitement as he said, "Moreover, if the spiritual plants in the medicinal field were eaten, wouldn't they be poisonous? How come Guidao was able to eat them but still be okay?" At this time, everyone's gaze and attention were focused on this lively group of people. Guidao seemed healthy, his wounds were beginning to heal, and there was no trace of a poisonous backlash. They were so shocked that their eyes were almost popping out of their sockets. This Foundation establishment stage boy had actually managed to cure this strange poison. While Ice Lotus Fairy, who they all previously placed high hopes on, and had spoken with such confidence, had ended up terribly failing. No one expected the results to be so unexpected. At the same time, once Feng Lianying had seen that He had really cured Guidao, she completely lost her mind. She didn't believe that her medical skills were inferior to that slut's. Impossible dash. Impossible dash. My diagnosis was absolutely not wrong. I'm a 5th-rank doctor and a direct disciple of Thousand Venom Valley's master. How could I lose to this slut? Give me the pill, and I'll find someone to try the medicine again. I will never admit defeat. Hysterical yelling like a maniac echoed around Thousand Herb Mist, and everyone looked at the woman's sinister expression, feeling nothing but disgust and hatred. This so-called Ice Lotus Fairy was merely an idiot with an undeserved reputation. She had no excellent medical skills. What was even more embarrassing is that she'd obviously failed, yet she still wanted to try her medicine on innocent martial artists, regardless of people's lives. She was really too shameful and malicious. The moment when Feng Lianying was about to find someone else to try her medicine, a palm ruthlessly landed on her face, causing her to stagger to the ground. When Feng Lianying looked up, she saw Feng Yunjing's cold, murderous look. Until when do you want to keep losing face? Chapter 331, Genuine Antidote. Feng Lianying's mouth gaped open, her heart filling with resentment. Just as she was going to say something more, Feng Yunjing's next words made her tremble and she no longer dared to act recklessly. If you dare tarnish the reputation of the Feng family again, I'll send you to the ancestral temple of the Feng family, and you can never think of coming out. Going to the Feng family's ancestral temple meant that her name would be removed from the Feng family records. From then on, her life would be over, and she could no longer appear on Miluo continent. That, for Feng Lianying, who was filled with pride and a thirst for power, was simply a fate worse than death. On the other hand, when Heshi heard the inquiries from Qing Long and the others, the hint of a smile flashed in her eyes. She didn't answer but instead took out a spiritual supplement pill. Next, she walked over to the spreading pool of squirming blood and dropped the pill on it. Everyone was puzzled and couldn't help but gather closer. Soon, something shocking to everyone occurred. The blood that was originally only the size of 2 palms suddenly made a pfff noise after the spiritual supplement pill was thrown into it. Then, the area of blood grew bigger and bigger, while the speed it was squirming at rapidly increased. The way that the blood struggled and pulsed was like a blood demon coming to life. While that spiritual supplement pill, at this time, had been entirely swallowed up. Everyone's mouths opened wide, astonishment showing clearly on their faces. Gu Lufeng murmured, "This poison can become stronger by swallowing spiritual power. So that's the reason you eliminated the spiritual power within the spiritual herb and in my uncle first?" Heshi nodded, unhurriedly answering, "Purple monkey flower, pomegranate fire fruit, and dragon grass are indeed the nemesis of this poison. However, the rich spiritual power contained within these herbs is actually the greatest source of nourishment to this poison. Which means the herbs that were originally ready to detoxify the poison not only didn't work but instead made the poison absorb the spiritual power and become stronger." In fact, Heshi had read about it in the overflowing cauldron pill scripture, that this poison was indeed the blood-intoxicated poison, and that purple monkey flower, pomegranate fire fruit, and dragon grass were the antidote. However, because the way to make blood-intoxicated poison had long been lost from Miluo continent for so many years, many people were unaware of the real character of this poison, that spiritual power was its food. Feng Lianying thought that she knew the nemesis of blood-intoxicated poison and how to detoxify it, but little did she know the correct way to cure the poison. In addition to it requiring purple monkey flower, pomegranate fire fruit, and dragon grass, the most important part was that all the spiritual power within the herbs and the patient had been expelled. For a long time now, spiritual power was a nemesis to all poisons. In general, as long as the spiritual power was strong enough, it could easily resist the erosion of all types of poison. However, for blood-intoxicated poison it was the opposite, spiritual power was instead its most vital nourishment. It's no wonder that Feng Lianying took it for granted that the 5 elements blood coagulation pill would be able to help. As for why some of the herbs in the medicinal field can be consumed, and some of them are poisonous, He smiled leisurely before she indifferently said, I can only tell you that I'm able to distinguish them one by one, which herbs in this field are poisoned, and which ones are normal. But as for the method to differentiate them, forgive me, but I can't tell you that. The fact is that she didn't really know how to explain because it was a kind of intuition she'd gained after dealing with poisons for many years. She only needs to smell them and see them, and she could tell right away whether or not the things in front of her were poisonous. Although He's explanation was anything but detailed, it was still much clearer than Feng Lianying's. Those people who were still worried about Gui Dao suffering from residual effects now no longer had any doubts. Chapter 332, Disobedient and Unfilial. This youngster before them was only about 15 to 16 years old with a cultivation base at foundation establishment stage, but no one expected that his medical skills would be so formidable. The crowd was in a daze at first before they suddenly returned to their senses. Then, all of them suddenly rushed to her and kowtowed before her. Godly doctor, a person as great as yourself would, of course, forgive such offenses committed by us lowly people, right? Please save us. That's right, that's right. Saving our lives will be a most meritorious deed. Please be merciful and give us a cure. Watching those shameless people now begging Wu Yu waved his fan as he sneered, My, I wonder who was it that just finished insulting my young master Shi and said that he was a quack who would kill people? And who was it that said my young master wasn't even worthy of carrying Ice Lotus Fairy's shoes, and saying that they mustn't let him leave the medicinal field alive? Now that you know that my young master is extremely skilled, you turn to him to seek help from him to save you. I wonder how many faces you all have. Everyone was so ashamed, to the point that their faces were filled with resentment. Wu Yu's words were obviously too relentless, making them all lose face. However, as they felt the poison within them flare up once more, their little lives flashed before their eyes. How could they still consider their reputations? They didn't respond to Wu Yu's words, and instead kept incessantly weeping for help with faces filled with snot and tears. At this time, a man covered in blood and on his last breaths suddenly crawled out from the crowd. He didn't crawl towards He as everyone else did. Rather, he crawled to Gu Lufeng and tugged at his clothes as he hoarsely said, Lufeng, you're Murong Lufeng, right? Gu Lufeng looked down at him. Although the person before him was completely different, he recognized his identity at a glance. He was the head of the Murong family, Murong Zhangfeng. Gu Lufeng narrowed his eyes, and suddenly, a blade appeared in his hand, and he quickly cut off the corner of his clothes that was being pulled by Murong Zhangfeng. Then, he coldly asked, Who are you? Do I know you? Don't pretend. I heard all your conversations with Gui Dao. Although Murong Zhangfeng had tried to lower his voice as much as possible, his extreme anger still made his voice sharper. You're a disobedient and unfilial bastard. Obviously, you're offspring of the Murong family, yet these past few years you've actually been colluding with strangers to attack Murong family's medicinal hall. You bastard, Murong Feng is your father. The Murong family is also a place where you were born and raised, but you actually dare to bite the hand that feeds you. Don't you fear retribution for what you've done? Gu Liufeng's face was covered with a mask, so the only things visible were his cold eyes and the slight smirk hanging on a corner of his mouth. You people from the Murong family are devoid of consciences and unafraid of retribution for your bad deeds. So, why would I be afraid? You dash. You dash. You are indeed Murong Lufeng. You bastard. Murong Zhangfeng was so enraged that he suddenly raised his voice and continuously bellowed, You're the same as that shameless mother of yours, nothing but cruel and unscrupulous. We of the Murong family raised you for nothing. Murong Zhangfeng's curses were said in such rage that the speed of the poison in his body became faster because of his emotions, causing him acute pain that made his anger be quickly replaced by fear. He looked up and saw Gu Lufeng slightly lowering his head until he couldn't see his expression. He was embarrassed and ashamed of cursing, so he quickly said, I can overlook these small matters. Now, quickly get me the antidote from that kid. When I return to the Murong family, I'll ask for you to be dealt with leniently. Chapter 333, For What Reason? Everyone in the crowd around Heshi, because of Murong's Zhangfeng's yelling, were all focusing on Gu Lufeng. Heshi sauntered towards Gu Lufeng, glanced at Murong Zhangfeng, then whispered, "What's going on?" As soon as she'd finished asking, she noticed that his body was trembling slightly and his hands hanging by his sides were clenched into fists. It was clear that he'd reached an extreme level of anger. And when Murong Zhangfeng saw Heshi, surprise flashed on his face before he shouted, "Genius Dr. Shi, I'm the head of the Murong family, Murong Zhangfeng. Give me the antidote, and as long as you save me, my older brother and my Murong family will owe you our thanks. I believe in that in Yanjing City you must have heard the name of my Murong family, right?" Heshi sneered and arrogantly looked at him, her eyes were full of contempt. "Who are you?" The disdain and contempt in her voice were clear. The people who heard it couldn't help but snigger. Murong Zhangfeng, however, was so angered that the flesh on his face trembled. But even so, when he remembered that his own little life was in the grip of the other party's hands, he didn't dare act rashly and suppressed his anger. I'm not just the head of the Murong family, but also Murong Liufeng's paternal uncle. You just saved Murong Liufeng's maternal uncle, so why don't you save me too? Murong Lufeng?" Heshi raised her brows, and then looked at Gu Lufeng. She saw him looking at Murong Zhangfeng and Murong Hai, who was unconscious, with a gaze as cold as a blade. That gaze was like he was going to dismember their bodies. The crowd who'd been begging suddenly started gossiping. "Isn't the man who's wearing the mask young Master Gu, the owner of Xingde Hall, Gu Lufeng? Why did the head of the Murong family call him Murong Lufeng? Is he a member of the Murong family? But I'd heard that Xingde Hall was suppressing the Murong family, even seizing half of the Murong family's market in the city outside of Yanjing City. If Gu Lufeng is a member of the Murong family, then isn't he too disobedient and unfilial?" Everyone looked at Gu Lufeng with gazes filled with questions and anger. However, Murong Zhangfeng had started rejoicing in his heart as this was the perfect opportunity to take advantage of the situation because unfortunately, the poison in his body was getting stronger and stronger. While Murong Hai, who was lying beside him, was now barely even breathing. Murong Zhangfeng quickly yelled at Gu Lufeng, "Murong Lufeng, you still haven't gotten Genius Dr. Shi to give me the antidote." "Give you the antidote?" Gu Lufeng, who'd been silent all this time, finally began to speak. His voice was full of bitter resentment and sarcasm. "Murong Zhangfeng, you want me to save you? For what reason? Is it based on the matter of you treating my mother and I worse than dogs?" As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand to take down his mask. In the next moment, everyone exclaimed and sucked in sharp gasps. Appearing in front of them was an ambiguous face. It was incomparably handsome, and yet it was also gorgeous. Unfortunately, as it happened, there was a long ghastly scar running from his brow to just under his right ear. This scar was blood red and was like a centipede crawling on his face. It was a vivid contrast to his slightly pale skin. His initially handsome face had been transformed into one of a horrible monster due to the scar. Although it was only a single scar, with the hatred reflected in Gu Liufeng's eyes, and Murong Zhangfeng's eyes that avoided looking at the scar, everyone could easily tell that the Murong family must have treated Gu Lufeng and his mother exceptionally poorly. Chapter 334 Thank you. Murong Zhangfeng's guilty conscience was soon taken over by his heartlessness and selfishness. "You unworthy offspring! Your mother was nothing more than a concubine and you are nothing more but a bastard. We raised you and only occasionally hit you. Is disciplining unscrupulous children unnatural? If you know what's good for you, then give me the antidote. If not, when I go back, I will remove you from the Murong family records. From then, your only option is to die and become a lonely ghost." Gu Lufeng burst out laughing, then he coldly stared at Murong Zhangfeng. "What I regret most about my birth was that I was born in the Murong family. If you can remove me from the Murong family, then I will have to thank you. Unfortunately, to return to Murong family, you must live past today, and this matter is easier said than done. I won't kill you, I just don't wish for you to die an easy death. I want you to experience a slow and painful death filled with despair compared to death by a knife. This will be far more interesting. Murong Zhangfeng trembled when he met Gu Liufeng's gaze. At this moment, he no longer wished for Gu Luifeng to save him, his only option is to look towards He. Repeatedly kowtowing, he said, "Genius Dr. Shi, please pay no mind to that unscrupulous brute's nonsense. As long as you save my life, Murong family will give you 3 finished properties." He faintly smiled and suddenly pulled a bottle of the antidote out of her sleeves. Murong Zhangfeng's face was wild with joy as he stared at the bottle. He believed that He had finally been persuaded by him. However, He turned around and threw the antidote to Gu Lufeng. Lightly laughing, she said, "The bottle contains herbal medicine and intoxicated blood. When they are mixed together, the reaction is very interesting. If you wish to see him suffer more, then sprinkle some on him." You guys. Murong Zhangfeng didn't expect to die, his whole heart was once full of expectation, but this has become the result. Taking the medicine bottle, Gu Liufeng's face, which looked fierce due to the scar, held a somewhat heartfelt smiling expression. He slowly stepped forward, and before Murong Zhangfeng could slander him again, he had already sprinkled the medicine on him and the unconscious Murong Hai's bodies. The only sound was, "Ah!" The cry broke through the heavens and everyone present at the scene's eardrums rung. Subsequently, Murong Zhangfeng and the originally unconscious Murong Hai were both painfully rolling around the floor. The pair of them were incessantly wailing as thin black blood oozed out of their bodies. The grief-filled howls continued on for the length of time it takes to burn a stick of incense. The black blood consumed both men's bodies, completely melting them. Gu Lufeng slowly took the bottle of medicine and poured some intoxicated blood on the thin blood. Soon after, the blood made zzz sounds before evaporating and completely disappearing. His fierce-looking face carried an expression of both grief and hate that couldn't be dismissed. When he turned around and faced a young youth with matchless beauty and clear, black eyes, Gu Lufeng suddenly felt as if the stone, which had been weighing in his heart for many years, had been moved just a tiny bit. He walked forward a few steps, gazing deeply at He, saying, "He, thank you." He raised her hand up, interrupting him, "Wasn't it you that said friends do not have to thank each other?" Gu Lufeng stared blankly, his long eyelashes faintly trembling. The bright red scar on his face caused his expression to look more fierce, but his mouth held a shallow, gentle smile. Chapter 335 Profiting from one's misfortunes. After everyone saw for themselves the miserable death Murong Zhangfeng and Murong Hai suffered, they all immediately thought about the poison on their body breaking out at any time. Who dared to still hesitate? Like a swarm of bees, everyone turned to run towards He, begging her to save their lives. To tell you the truth, He had no mercy in her heart for these people. Looking at the group of people miserably crying for help, the idea of delivering all living creatures from suffering came to mind during this moment. He remained unmoved, coldly saying, "If you want us to save you, that can be done. However, I, Dr. Shi, want to continue treating the way I was doing so previously. The people who look pleasing to the eye may receive treatment for free. But for the people who aren't pleasing to the eye, even if you offered 10 million in gold, I still may not treat you. And if you guys still wish for me to save you, this is doable. So long as you guys are able to take out an object which meets my eye, such as a pill or rare treasure. 1 treasure in exchange for 1 life. If not, then don't speak." Immediately after He said these words, everyone looked at each other in dismay and nobody made a sound for a long time. After a while, somebody couldn't help themselves and lowly said a sentence, "Isn't it a doctor's job to save people? How can you act so snobbish?" He looked unhurried as Wu Yu already stepped forward, while waving a fan, and sneered, "Ice Lotus Fairy isn't snobbish. She's willing to treat you guys for free. Why don't you go ask her to treat you then?" Once these words were spoken, everyone's complexions immediately paled and nobody dared to speak anymore. Just then, the Ice Lotus Fairy really did agree to treat everybody free of charge, but what was the result? They saw the two bodies explode, becoming a puddle of blood. And that malicious fairy, even if she did not require payment, only gave the medicine to the people with riches and power. Compared to requiring payment, how is this any different? However, this straightforward youth in front of their eyes may be a better option. He felt disinclined to stay with these grumbling people. Directly towards Wu Yu, she said, "This matter will be handed over to you, you will get a fraction of the gains. These trivial matters young master Shi has given this humble one to do." Not waiting for He to finish speaking, Wu Yu's eyes already brightened up and excitedly said, "As long as you let me try some more of your delicious food, I wouldn't even hesitate to go through water and tread on fire." 2. He's face twitched, she felt as if this Wu Yu didn't deserve the title of a glutton. He threw away all integrity just to eat something. 3. Able to get He's nod of approval, Wu Yu immediately felt very excited. In order to extort those pitiful people, he wouldn't leave any hands out. 4. With Xing Dahal's master Gu Liufeng's added help, both men were ruthless, causing the group of people to quickly become angry. Truth to be told, if my level 3 pills were exchanged for crystals it would be several 100,000. Yet this was still not enough to invite several doctors. You still can't hate enough? Acting like you guys, who are profiting from someone's misfortune, really can't saving people. Where is the doctor? Isn't it just made up of purple monkey flower, pomegranate fire fruit, and dragon grass which is then baked with spiritual energy? This old man, is also a level 2 doctor, I don't believe that I can't do it too. Wu Yu and Gu Lufeng watched as everyone ran into the medicinal field to find herbs for medicine while shouting curses. The pair of them weren't even worried in the slightest, on the contrary, they took joy in the calamity. The group of people believed that just by knowing the prescription, they would be able to imitate He's detoxification method. Soon, they will realize how stupid they are. But some people couldn't stand the intoxicated blood poison, fearful of the pain it brought. Unable to bear it any longer, they finally took out a treasure that they had obtained from the secret territory to exchange. This is the level 5 magical beast inner pill I obtained from Huang Mo territory. In order to get this level 5 inner pill, I nearly got eaten by the magical beast. Originally the plan was to use this inner pill in order to advance a level. Now my life is quickly slipping away, what talk of advancing a level? This inner pill is for you, quickly give me the antidote. 1. Compared to requiring payment, how is this any different? The Ice Lotus Fairy is essentially only picking the people who would be able to help her in the future. 2. I wouldn't even hesitate to go through water and tread on fire, not afraid of any difficulty. Wu Yu would be happy to do just about anything for another bite of He's food. 3. She felt as if this Wu Yu didn't deserve the title of a glutton. He threw away all integrity just to eat something. I feel like the author means that the title of glutton isn't enough to describe how much Wu Yu would do for food. 4. He wouldn't leave any hands out. Wu Yu will expend all of his energy into this, he'll give it his all. Chapter 336 Vile Thoughts. Wu Yu accepted the inner pill and checked it over. Suddenly beaming with joy, he handed over a bottle of He's boiled medicinal juice. Remember to clear your body of spiritual power before taking it. No longer daring to tarry, the youth emptied his body of all spiritual power. Soon after, he quickly drank the antidote. Right after he drank the antidote, severe pain began to spread. The pain caused him to repeatedly howl, rolling around on the floor. But, before half an hour even passed, the pain began to gradually reside and the pus on his body also completely disappeared. Even the wound began to rapidly heal. He felt his spiritual power return to his dantian, 1, and the burning pain in his internal organs faded away. The youth couldn't help but laugh. Facing he dropped to his knees with his hands clasped, his face still held some of his previous unwillingness. Thank you, genius doctor, for saving my life. Compared to one's own life, any medicinal pill isn't important when you don't have a life to live anymore. At this moment, the people who entered the medicinal field to collect herbal medicine in order to imitate Heshi's refining method to make the boiled medicinal juice, shockingly discovered that the moment their spiritual energy touched the originally green herbal medicine, it would immediately turn into ashes. It was much harder to accomplish than Heshi's effortless demonstration suggested. Now, everybody had no other way out. Additionally, people were already able to obtain the antidote after exchanging their treasure. Who dared to still hesitate? One after another, they took out their treasures to exchange with Heshi. From far away, Feng Lianing clenched her fists. She watched Heshi's stars gathering around the moon appearance, too, and bit down on her teeth until they made gee sounds. Suddenly, she heard the sound of clunking and her well-taken care of little finger's fingernail broke in half as she felt a burst of pain. Why? Why? Why have I been beaten by such a low-lying waste? How many years have I spent cultivating? My teacher is the master of Thousand Poison Valley. My hard-earned reputation suddenly brought upon this result. I don't accept this. I'm not reconciled. Heaven is unfair, I must make that slut pay the price. Feng Lianying's voice was coarse, completely opposite to her usual sweet and dainty sound, and her whole face was even more terrifying. Nie Jinchen worriedly supported her, softly saying, Lianing Mei, 3, don't be angry, it's bad for your body to be angry over trash. Nie Jinchen didn't even get to finish speaking before Feng Lianing swung her hand up and ruthlessly slapped his face. Shrieking, get lost. Who do you think you are? Who let you touch me? Don't think I know your vile thoughts towards me. You only covet my status and good looks. Pa! I don't even dare look at what status you have. Merely someone with no family background, just a disciple of Luli's sect. Are you worthy of me? Can you match up with Big Brother you? Get lost. Go far away. Putting a hand over his face, Nie Jinchen was in disbelief. His face got scratched by Feng Lianying's fingernails, leaving traces of blood. To the side, disciples of the Luli sect watched the pair. His expression was full of pity and joy over another person's calamity. All the admiration and ties of friendship in his heart transformed into embarrassment and hate. Nie Jinchen bowed his head, tightly clenching his fist. He didn't utter another word. The brightness in his eyes dulled a bit. Feng Yunjing saw the whole moment between Feng Lianing and Nie Jinchen and coldly laughed. Silly woman, simply wasted Feng family's cultivation from these past few years. 1. Dantian. The Dantian is where one's qi resides, it's located 2 points below the navel. 2. Stars gathering around the moon appearance, everyone embraces or surrounds one thing. 3. Mei, younger sister. Chapter 337. It's better to go back with me. If she wasn't the Thousand Poison Valley's master's favorite disciple, then he would have long tossed aside this woman who lost face for Feng family. As expected, children of concubines really didn't deserve to be in the public view. Feng Yunjing lightly swung his arms and lowly spoke to a trusted confidant on the side. Looks like this grassland doesn't have the stuff we need. Prepare to leave here immediately. Yes, young master. The trusted confidant answered, bowing. However, looking to the side at the Luli sect disciples who had been knocked unconscious by the intoxicated blood poison, he couldn't help but ask, young master, what do we do with these 2 people? Originally the Luli sect disciples stayed far away and nobody got infected. But unfortunately, Feng Lianing allowed Shengguan Rui to take the 5 elements blood coagulation pill. As a result, Shengguan Rui exploded in front of everyone and 2 of Luli sect's disciples who were caught off guard were touched by a little bit of the pus. Sure enough, they got infected as well. Feng Yunjin's eyes were ice cold, lacking any emotions. Leave them here to die on their own. Suddenly his heart moved, he consciously checked, looking towards his treasured Heshi. The youth was like a painting, the skin was the color of snow, their eyes were full of bright stars. The bright red lips were lifted on either corner. The youth had unparalleled seductiveness. As Feng Yunjin's eyes looked on, he suddenly turned to walk towards the youth. Right at this moment, Heshi was also checking over the treasure Wu Yu and Gu Lufeng were handing over. Every speck was the same, her heart blossomed with joy. These indeed were level 5 magical beast inner pills. Previously, she worked extremely hard but was only able to obtain 2 of these. This time, she's able to replenish Dan Dan and the little golden dragon again. Furthermore, 12 level 4 books which could be used to save the lives of groups people. Really couldn't be better. Unexpectedly, there was also a flying skill book which was able to increase speed. Clicking her tongue, there definitely wasn't a price for this on the market. While Heshi's face remained calm and collected on the outside, she had long gotten extremely excited in her heart over the prospect of earning money. Taking the next box, Heshi was just about to open it when suddenly she felt her eyes darken and she was enveloped in a shadow. Very quickly, she heard Feng Yunjing's icy voice, "Heshi, 2 of my Luli sex disciples were infected with intoxicated blood poison." So? Heshi raised her head up, looking at him and coldly asked. Standing very close, Feng Yunjing could take the youth. Or he ought to say the young girl's clear and neat face was pleasing to the eyes. He couldn't help but smile deviously. "It would be better to go back with me. If you're able to treat my subordinates, your ability could also be used by my Feng family." Saying this, Feng Yunjing slowly stooped down. His hot breath came out as he controlled the desire to slowly spit in Heshi's face. "You can rest assured, I won't treat you unfairly. Whatever Nangong Yu gives you, I can also give. Furthermore, I can give even more. How about it?" Heshi, who had been sluggish for half the day, suddenly reacted as if she heard a joke, rubbing her ears. "Excuse me. This Feng Yunjing and Feng Lianing just a moment ago wanted to join together and kill her. Suddenly, he now want her to come back with him to Feng family and still asks her how about it. Is this person experiencing a mental breakdown? Or has their brain short-circuited?" But before Heshi could say anything, a pair of black shadows wielding swords came down from the sky, ruthlessly chopping towards Feng Yunjing with killing intent. Feng Yunjing already had his guard up and began rapidly retreating. But he also sacrificed his magic weapon before he was able to even consider avoiding 2, who seemed to attack with the intent to destroy the earth. Boom! The earth shook as lightning came down. Chapter 338 Give It to Me. Slowly flashing, Nangong Yu's figure was like a fantasy, arriving to stand beside Heshi. He extended his hand out to take Heshi's hand, drawing her closer to his chest. His cold gaze stared towards the nearby Feng Yunjing, saying, "Feng Yunjing, don't let me remind you a 3rd time. Xie is mine, don't try and lay a hand on her again or don't blame me for not being polite." Feng Yunjing's face didn't hold a lot of anger, but it did have coldness and disdain. "Nangong Yu, even though your Hell King Manor's reputation is considered impressive, but my Feng family's prestige is impressive too. Good poultry chooses wood. 1. I trust that genius Dr. Xi knows which option is the best one to choose." The burst of electricity, although short, was able to attract everybody's attention. At this moment, just as Feng Yunjing said these words, everybody turned pale with fright. Looking southward, Nangong Yu waited and watched as the absent-mindedness in everyone's eyes turned to restrained fear and respect. Hell King. This is the famously brilliant His Highness Hell King, ah. At the mere age of 15, he was able to become a gold core and become Mi Luo continent's #1 genius. Using his own strength he was able single-handedly to fight against the magical beast's troops. He was able to save Jin Ling country from downfall, that His Highness Hell King. Not only that, he is also cruel and cold-blooded. With his Xian Yuan sword, he slaughtered thousands of lives, completely dyeing the soil on Gue Jin mountain range red. He is the lord of the netherworld. Feng Yunjing seemed to have not saw everyone's shocked expressions. Looking at Nangong Yu with a sneer, he slowly said, not to mention, you are the famous His Highness Hell King. With your prestige, you could get any beautiful girl you wanted. Why are you so stingy, holding on to a girl who's merely at foundation establishment stage? How about this, you give Shiyu to me. I promise that later on, 1/10 of the medicinal pills Feng family produces each year, will gift to you. How's that? Everyone, having heard this, simultaneously let out a sigh of relief. This was Feng family's yearly production of medicinal pills. Saying these pills are priceless still wouldn't be considered too much. Who didn't know that Feng family had a Grand Master level refining pharmacist? In the entirety of Miluo continent, the amount of Grand Master level refining pharmacists were like feathers of a phoenix. Each year, only 12 medicinal pills were produced and sold. Each of these medicinal pills were priceless and couldn't be bought with money. Everyone couldn't help but look towards Hell King. In their minds, although the foundation establishment stage youngster was a natural talent and had some skills, how could he compare to Feng family's medicinal pills? They thought, as long as Hell King's brain hadn't malfunctioned, he wouldn't refuse. However, Nangong Yu's expression was extremely chilly. He seemed extremely angry, comparable to a gunpowder barrel which was ready to burst at any given time. He looked coldly at Feng Yunjing, slowly raising the black sword he was holding in his hand. The sword's killing intent sent a shiver up everyone's spines. Feng Yunjing, if you wish to court death, then I don't mind helping you. Feng Yunjing narrowed his eyes and swept them over Nangong Yu and Heshi. Faintly smiling, he said, this was merely a suggestion. Nangong, even if you don't agree, you don't have to get so angry. You can go back and think this over. The promises I made today are forever valid. If you change your mind, you can find me at any time. Finished speaking, he looked towards Heshi and the blazing light in his eyes flashed away. Shiyu, Feng family's doors are always open for you. You can also come find me at any time. Finished speaking, he threw out a dark red wooden tablet before turning around to leave without stopping. 1. Good poultry chooses wood, has a similar idea to, a talented person chooses a patron of integrity, or, a fine bird chooses the best tree to nest in. 2. Feathers of a phoenix, metaphor for precious and rare things. Chapter 339 Plan ahead. Heshi picked up the wooden tablet, turning it around in her hands to look at the entire thing. This was actually the token to Feng family's outer door, and its level was quite high too. Non-inner core disciples aren't allowed to block it. Not bad. This really was going to the Feng family to kill someone for his property. 1. An indispensable move. Ah. Heshi beamed, storing the command tablet in her space. Seeing this, Nangong Yu couldn't help it and his expression became extremely ugly. He took Heshi into his embrace, coldly surveying her. He said, Sheer, if you dare to leave me to go into another man's embrace then I will. I will, you will do what? Heshi raised her eyebrow up. She happily looked up at him, you'll kill me? Nangong Yu's breath stilled. He felt as if this person was both crafty and beautiful, allowing him to love and hate her. He wished he could marry her immediately so he could shut her away and not allow anybody else to covet her. But the reasonable part of his mind told him, Sheer was different. He couldn't possibly lock her up for a lifetime and break her wings. She had her own world and wonderful life. Heshi saw his cold face trying to repress his emotions. He had the appearance that he would burst at any time. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even if I wished to go into another man's embrace, I wouldn't choose to go to that mental case, Feng Yunjing, okay? You seem to think there's a hole in my brain and I would look for a tyrant, ah. Saying this, she walked away and didn't bother him anymore. She minded her own business, continuing to open all the treasures Wu Yu had gotten. Nangong Yu watched Heshi leave, but he didn't move for a long time. His eyes stayed at the site where Feng Yunjing and his subordinates left from. Qing Long stepped forward, to the side, he softly said, Master. Nangong Yu's long eyelashes dropped down, hiding his stormy mood. Then with a slow and low voice he said, "Notify Wu Xian, prepare ahead." Qing Long was startled, his face betrayed his emotions. Master. This decision was related to Ming Wang Manor and Master's future. Master understated the decision. Was it because of the matter concerning Feng Yunjing? Or was it because of Wang Fei, too? Qing Long wanted to say more, but when he saw Nangong Yu's cold and indifferent expression, he swallowed his words. In any case, Master's command was their everything, they just have to follow it. Yes, Master. Qing Long bowed. The indifference in his eyes slowly turned cold. Just for this day, Ming Wang Manor has already endured silently for long enough. During this time, the treasures collected by Wu Yu and Gu Lufeng was quite a lot. At one side, Heshi examined these treasures and then threw them into her space. Just thinking about the amount of yuan crystals she could get from these treasures, she became very happy. One night turned into a rich feeling, it truly was too refreshing. Genius Dr. Shi. Suddenly there was a male's hoarse voice sounding from above her head. Heshi lifted her head up to discover a middle-aged man, who was about 30 years old. Although his cultivation base wasn't high, his body was intact, apparently unaffected by the intoxicated blood poison. The man's skin was very coarse and his hands were full of scars and calluses. His eyes were muddy and seemed to be filled full of sadness and hate. But they were also filled with helplessness. Meeting Heshi's gaze, he didn't have many words to say. Instead, he took a jade box from his arms and handed it to Heshi. I heard them say Genius Dr. Shi was looking for Burning Heaven Realm's divine dragon fruit. I accidentally got this in Burning Heaven Realm. I hope Genius Dr. Shi won't ignore this. 1. To kill someone for his property, idiom, similar meaning to robbing someone. 2. Wang Fei, princess. Chapter 340. What do you want me to do for you? Heshi blankly stared, then suddenly she opened her eyes wide. For a split second, she thought she heard wrong. Divine dragon fruit. Although she did deliberately mention to Wu Yu that she was looking for the divine dragon fruit, she never thought she would be able to get it through this exchange. After all, the divine dragon fruit was extremely precious, the process of obtaining it is very challenging, forget about even a few people being able to obtain it. But, even if one does manage to obtain the fruit, with its high value, who would be stupid enough to trade it away? Heshi accepted the jade box and opened it. After taking one look at it, she already knew this really was the divine dragon fruit. This divine dragon fruit was little golden dragon's most needed spiritual fruit, it was the one which could heal him the most. Speaking to the middle-aged man, her tone was very mild. Do you have any relatives who need me to detoxify or save them? Bring me over to see them. Unexpectedly, the middle-aged man stood in the same spot he was originally. His face was filled with sadness and desperation, and after a while, he finally said, "No more. No more. There's already nobody left, it's too late." He suddenly turned around, pointing to a distant silhouette of a woman lying down. Then he pointed to the ground where the blood boiled then disappeared. Distressed, he said, "Genius Dr. Shi, do you understand now? That is my wife and son, just 1 hour before, they were still alive. Although my son was infected, he at the very least had the will to live. But, Feng Yanling. It's all because of Feng Yanling, that malicious woman. Unexpectedly, she forced my son to eat the 5 elements blood coagulation pill. Letting my son explode and die, becoming nothing but a puddle of blood. My wife was so angry, she went to argue. But, she ended up being seriously injured by Luli Temple's people. I'm unwilling, I'm very unwilling. Clearly, our family is nothing more than insignificant warriors. And Luli sect, everybody minds their own business. For what reason did Feng Yanling not take our lives as lives? Why did she allow my family to fall apart? The family is bankrupt and the people are dead." 1. The middle-aged man's voice was full of suffering and despair, breaking one's heart. Tears were flowing down his face. Heshi was silent for a long time, gently pinching the jade box. Lowering her voice, "You gifted me the divine dragon fruit, but what do you want me to do for you?" The man miserably shook his head. "After losing my wife and child, these material items no longer have any worth to me. My family passed on specific ways to make charms. My family stayed in Burning Heaven Realm for 7 days and 7 nights, ambushing people. With great difficulty, we were able to obtain this divine dragon fruit. The original hope was to improve my son's aptitude, giving him the ability to enter an influential sect to give him a more promising future. But now, it's all over. All finished. What use is this divine dragon fruit to me now?" The man's voice got heavier and heavier, filled with more and more sadness and hatred. He seemed to have lost all hope before slowly lowering his voice. "Genius Dr. Shi, if I was to say I had any hopes left, it would be that one day when you deal with that slut Feng Yanling. When you give Feng Yanling and Luli's sect a tragic end, let me watch this scene with my own eyes." Heshi raised her eyebrows up and noncommittally said, "How do you know that I will deal with Feng Yanling? And how do you know that I have the strength to bring Luli's sect to a tragic end?" 1. The family is bankrupt and the people are dead. Idiom, the man's family is ruined and he has nobody left. Chapter 341 White Hairs of Old Age. The middle-aged man's eyes had a glimpse of gloominess, slowly saying, "Just based on the fact that genius Dr. Shi is able to cause Feng Lianing, a level 5 doctor, to lose face in front of everyone. As well as the fact that His Highness Hell King stands behind genius Dr. Shi. I'm willing to gamble, so I'm going to gamble my desire for revenge on genius Dr. Shi." The corner of Heshi's mouth curved a bit, weighing the jade box in her hand. Nodding her head, "Good, considering this divine dragon fruit, I promise you." The middle-aged man's face finally showed a slight smile. He took out a silver talisman from his arms and handed it over to Heshi, respectfully saying, "This is my personally prescribed 1,000-mile talisman. Even though it can only be used once, as long as you burn this talisman, then no matter what corner genius Dr. Shi is at in the Miluo continent, I will be able to receive the message at any end of the earth." Heshi took the silver talisman, slightly swaying. She watched the middle-aged man stumbling back to his wife's side, mournfully crying as he carried her cold corpse. Suddenly, a pair of hands covered her eyes, blocking her line of sight. Nangong Yu's low and gentle voice sounded out, "Don't look anymore, Shi'er and this king, we will definitely live together until we have white hairs of old age. There won't be a day where we're separated by life and death." Heshi took his show and turned around to glare at him. "Who will live together and have white hairs of old age with you? Don't you have your Feng Yanling Mimi, one?" Nangong Yu reached his hand out to pinch her nose. The expression on his face expressed both helplessness and pampering. "Shi'er, if you say this again, I'll take it as if you're jealous of me." Heshi slapped his hand. Her gaze landed on the jade box. She must immediately go back into her space to help little golden dragon absorb the spiritual power from the divine dragon fruit. But to be able to enter her space, she had to be asleep. Heshi grabbed at Nangong Yu's sleeves and softly said, "Lean your shoulder down." Not waiting for him to respond, she leaned her head against his shoulder, closed her eyes and entered her space. At first, Nangong Yu stared blankly. But soon after, his mouth curved up into a gentle and sweet expression. He reached his hands out to bring the sleeping girl into his embrace. This girl must have been so busy these past few days, she must be so tired. But Heshi, who had entered her space, was shocked. In the entirety of her space, she couldn't spot Dan Dan's figure. She didn't even know where the purple abyss vine ran off to, it only left a small purple trunk in front of the spot Heshi was standing at. Heshi yelled for Dan Dan several times, however, she didn't receive any response. This scared Heshi so much, her complexion changed. It wasn't until purple abyss vine linked to her again that she let out a sigh of relief. Afterwards, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Her space created a screen, the screen showed a vast medicinal field. Inside the vast medicinal field there was a pink pig and the purple abyss vine happily traveling back. Having gotten their location, the pair immediately ate a green spiritual plant, completely devouring it. However, her space didn't have any high-level spiritual plants in it. But the strange thing was that when she was just recently outside, she didn't find any changes in the medicinal field. Through the help of the purple abyss vine, Hashi was able to establish a connection to her own small spoiled chowhound. Dan, didn't you say there were terrifying things inside this medicinal field, causing you to be very afraid? Dan was just eating to his heart's content, and when he heard Hashi's question, he couldn't answer truthfully. After a while, he was finally full and started giggling. Mimi, younger sister, in this situation Feng Yan Ling is not his blood-related sister. Chapter 342 Eating while packing leftovers. Mother, the food here tastes good. Even though it's black and smelly, when I eat it, Dan feels as if it tastes very good. The strength that bad woman destroyed is all back too. Black and smelly. Hashi was both astounded and worried. Dan, are you sure you can eat these spiritual plants? What about the intoxicated blood poison? Dan rolled around in the medicinal field, exposing his white round belly. Happily laughing, he said, Mother is dumb. Because there is anti-purple abyss here, there's no possible way to be poisoned. The smelly and black items have been given to anti-purple abyss, the rest are all for Dan. Ah woo. It's so delicious. Mother, do you want some too? Anti-purple abyss? These two, when did their relationship become so good? Moreover, why has he been calling purple abyss vine anti-purple abyss? Shouting ant towards a plant. Dan, are you sure your logic is sound? Anti-purple abyss will quickly arrange a difficult fantasy array. We are here to eat. Together, Mother and that friendly older brother didn't even find out. So while we were eating, we were also packing leftovers. Therefore, if we want to continue eating in your space, we can. Mother, is Dan clever? Very good. Unexpectedly, he even knew about packing leftovers. He really is clever. At the same time, Hashi felt purple abyss vine's idea. Incomparably proud, the little purple abyss vine sat in her space swaying around as if expectantly awaiting Hashi's praise. Hashi's mouth twitched, but she looked at the high-level spiritual plant that got thrown into her space. Going forward to touch purple abyss vine's trunk, encouraging it. The purple abyss vine suddenly began swaying more joyfully, adopting the appearance of an epileptic. Hashi swore that if the high-grade spiritual plant could talk, it would have been laughing uncontrollably by now. But after determining that these two wouldn't run into any problems, she let out a sigh of relief. In fact, the spiritual medicines in this 100-herb garden were truly real. But she didn't know why. For some reason, there were many spiritual plants in this garden. The levels of these magical plants weren't high, but they were very much like weeds. Their vitality was also extremely vigorous. After growing for a millennium, they covered nearly the entirety of the medicinal field. From the outside, the magical and spiritual plants looked the exact same. However, the magical plants would secrete a poison. For example, these specific magical plants would exude the intoxicated blood poison. And once a soldier died of poisoning from these plants, their body would rot into the soil and the spiritual energy would seep into the air, becoming the best nourishment for these magical plants. In fact, in the beginning, these magical plants weren't scary. Especially in the central plains of Mi-Luo continent, one's chance of ever encountering these plants was exceptionally low. There also wasn't any soil to nourish the magical plants, to add on to the fact that these plants were a rare sight. As a result, so many high-level soldiers, including Feng Yunjing, didn't recognize these magical plants. However, purple abyss vine was different. It was originally a level 5 magical plant, so these low-level magical plants were not only crushed, because they contained a strong spiritual spirit, they also became Dan and purple abyss vine's food. Those genuine spiritual plants from the medicinal field were all thrown into her space by Dan, so Heshi didn't bother with those two gluttonous individuals. She turned to look at the little golden dragon's current situation. At this moment, the little golden dragon was still fast asleep. Although the wounds on his body seemed to have healed, his whole spirit was still very poor. 1. Anti-Purple Abyss will quickly arrange a difficult fantasy array. We are here to eat. Together, Mother and that friendly older brother didn't even find out. I'm not too sure what the author meant here, apologies for this. Chapter 343 Real Identity. Heshi had seen the method to taking the divine dragon fruit in the All Living Things record. Very quickly, she used a pure fire spiritual power to extract juice from the divine dragon fruit. It dripped into the little golden dragon's mouth. Afterward, little golden dragon's body emitted light golden color. Its originally dim scales got a gloss to them. The little golden dragon struggled to open its eyes and saw the familiar figure. The figure emitted the sweet fragrance of grass and wood. Although the smell was weak, it let the little golden dragon feel as if this figure was trustworthy and dependable. It was truly strange, this was the formidable golden dragon, but he wanted to depend on a weak mortal girl. The little golden dragon's whole heart was heavy and quickly closed its eyes again. Its tail subconsciously curled around Heshi's wrist, brushing against her palm. Heshi let out a sigh of relief, glancing over the little golden dragon again to ensure that its injury was healed. Following that, she looked towards her hand, which was holding the divine dragon fruit that had already lost all its spiritual power and juice. All that was left was a layer of skin and the pit. But if she planted the pit in her space, would it sprout and grow more fruit? Heshi decided to indulge in her fantasies and took the divine dragon fruit's pit to plant in the ancient rhyme spirit field. She gave the little golden dragon more drops of spiritual spring water. Then, she left her space. When Heshi opened her eyes, she felt a male near her. Heshi's whole face turned red when she discovered that her whole body was nestled in Nangong Yu's embrace and her head was resting on his stomach. She clearly only borrowed his shoulder to lean on. Heshi stood up straight and pushed herself out of Nangong Yu's hug. She heard his voice laced with regret saying, "Sheer, why don't you sleep a little longer? This king's shoulder is always open for you to lean on." Heshi grinded her teeth, preparing to slap Nangong Yu. But suddenly, a body began to rot, emitting a foul smell. A man from the crowd came out, running towards Heshi and throwing himself at her. Without needing Nangong Yu's command, Hell King Manor's bodyguards quickly came forward to block the man. However, the man refused to let this stop him. Repeatedly crying, his hoarse voice rang out, "Shiyu, I know your real identity. I know who you are. As long as you save me, I'll tell you your true identity." Nangong Yu's eyebrows furrowed, the man's yelling caught a lot of the surrounding people's attention. He quickly covered them with a void spiritual barrier, keeping everyone's prying ears out. He looked at this man, whose face was completely covered in blood, making people unable to make out his true facial features. Then, he coldly said, "Who are you? If you want the antidote, why don't you just take out a talisman to exchange for it?" The man shivered under Nangong Yu's gaze, his voice trembled, "Your Highness Hell King, please spare this humble one's life. I am the elder of Nalan family, Nalan Yenming." Hearing these words, Nangong Yu's eyebrows jumped up. Without speaking, he and Heshi both looked towards each other. Heshi's expression was somewhat grave. Nowadays, her appearance was completely different from Nalan Heshi's. Although this was someone from Nalan family, they still shouldn't be able to recognize her. But Nalan Yenming said he recognized her. Nalan Yenming didn't see the change in Heshi and Nangong Yu's complexions, but he still sucked in a breath. "I already exchanged my talisman for the antidote, but it still wasn't enough to completely get rid of the poison in my body." The antidote wasn't able to completely detoxify the poison? Heshi's eyebrows raised. "What were you doing previously?" Nalan Yenming's eyes flashed. However, his life was on the line, so he didn't dare to conceal anything and began to immediately explain the situation. Chapter 344 Nalan Yenming. As it turns out, Nalan Yenming originally entered the sealed dragon domain's secret territory with many life-saving pills gifted from Nalan Zhengzi. One of these pills was the famous 9 unequal wrongs pill. This pill would be able to save someone, no matter how serious the poison. And if the poison couldn't be completely relieved, it would at least delay the spread of the poison. It's due to this pill that Nalan Zhengzi was able to enter the Doctors' Association as a rank 3 doctor. The Doctors' Association only allowed rank 4 doctors in, and each Doctors' Association member had a unique and unmatched skill. With Nalan Zhengzi's ability, he wouldn't be eligible to enter the Doctors' Association. Actually, Nalan Yenming entered the medicinal field at the same time as Heshi's group. When the mist was cleared, many warriors seized the opportunity to enter the medicinal field, and Nalan Yenming was one of them. In the beginning, Nalan Yenming didn't enter the medicinal field, so he didn't get poisoned. However, he wanted to curry favor with the Feng family, and ultimately entered. In the end, he wasn't careful enough and touched some of the pus. Once he got affected by this strange intoxicated blood poison, he immediately ate his 9 unequal wrongs pill, believing that the poison wouldn't be able to kill him. Unfortunately, he found out that after eating his 9 unequal wrongs pill, it didn't detoxify the poison. On the other hand, it seemed to cause the poison to rot his body much faster than others. Adding on to the fact that Feng Lianying was unable to treat people using her 5 elements blood coagulation pill, Nalan Yenming thought he was utterly screwed. However, he didn't expect a youngster, at only foundation establishment stage, named Shiyu would be able to successfully detoxify people. It wasn't until this moment that Nalan Yenming started to take a closer look at Heshi, and the more he looked, the more shocked he became. Because the appearance of the godly doctor named Shiyu was uncannily similar to that person. And that person's medical skills was also exceptional, exactly the same as the ones this person in front of him had. Nalan family also obtained some of that person's medicinal inheritance, which was the only reason it was able to reach the status it had today. The more Nalan Yenming thought, the more scared he became and the more excited he became. If he was able to bring this youngster back to Nalan family, then, Nalan Manor's glory would be around the corner. But because Hell King supported Shiyu, Nalan Yenming didn't dare to act blindly without thinking. However, he didn't expect that because he had taken the 9 unequal wrongs pill, even though he took the antidote, the poison didn't completely improve like everyone else. Although it delayed the poison taking his life, the poison was still spreading in his body. Seeing that he was going to meet a violent death soon, he disregarded Hell King's power and rushed towards Heshi. Contrary to one might think, after hearing that Nalan Yenming took the 9 unequal wrongs pill, Heshi immediately knew what had happened. Although the 9 unequal wrongs pill contained detoxification qualities, it also had large quantities of spiritual power, which happened to be what nourished the intoxicated blood poison in Nalan Yenming's body. So naturally, her antidote wasn't enough to completely detoxify Nalan Yenming. Heshi squinted her eyes at the kneeling, blood man, and slowly said, "You said you knew my real identity. What do you mean?" Nalan Yenming suddenly became lively again, hurriedly taking out a scroll from his storage ring to hand to Heshi. Heshi slowly unrolled the scroll, and as the picture slowly unfolded, a beautiful woman in palace clothing came into view. Chapter 345 Third Young Master Nalan Ziyun. At this time, Wu Yu and Gu Lu Feng both walked up and stood behind Heshi, but when they saw the woman in the scroll's appearance, they sucked in a cold breath. This woman's phoenix eyes, perfect and jade-like skin resembled Jiutian Xuannu, as if she, Jiutian Xuannu, had come back down to the secular world. But what was the most shocking was that this woman's appearance was 78% the same as Heshi's. Looking closely at Heshi, people could almost image Heshi in woman's clothing. Gu Lu Feng's eyes held enthusiasm and shock, but he quickly pushed his feelings away, forcibly suppressing his throbbing heart. Wu Yu couldn't help but exclaim out in surprise, "This isn't his family's Wangfei, right? He looked at Nan Gongyu, then at Heshi and saw that his master's facial expression remained unperturbed. Not only that, his tender eyes never once stopped looking at Heshi. Heshi already knew that the woman in the scroll was this body's mother, Lingyue. However, Heshi looked towards Nalan Yenming and indifferently asked, "Who is this?" Nalan Yenming said at once, "You. You first must save me. As long as you save my life, I'll tell you everything you want to know." Heshi sneered at him, looking at him condescendingly. "I don't accept your deal." Finished speaking, Heshi turned and began to walk away. Seeing her carefree appearance, Nalan Yenming panicked. He hurriedly walked 2 steps forward, loudly saying, "I'll talk. I'll talk. This is Lingyue. She is the concubine of the current head of Nalan family, Nalan Jingzhu." Slowing down, Nalan Yenming lowered his voice and with a dignified look, he slowly said, "And you're most likely the child that Nalan family lost more than 10 years before, Nalan Ziyun." Heshi's heart was slightly moved but her face remained unmoved. She sneered, "Nalan Ziyun? Do you take me as a 3-year-old child, thinking you'll fool me so easily? In all of Yanjing City, who doesn't know that Nalan Manor's 3rd young master, Nalan Ziyun, was sent off to become a disciple of a large sect's master? If I am Nalan Ziyun, then who was the person sent away to the large sect?" Nalan Yenming's eyes were anxious, his eyes showing his internal struggle. However, he kept insisting, "You must believe me. You truly are Nalan Ziyun. You are my Nalan family's child. If not, then how could your appearance so closely resemble Lingyue's?" Heshi merely sneered, "In this world, how many people look alike? This is just some insignificant picture, yet you want me to believe your lies. Do you take me as an idiot?" Nalan Yenming felt the poison in his body seem to worsen, seeing that Heshi didn't believe him, he felt both fear and hate. He thought, just wait for this stinky boy to return to Nalan family. He must torture this youngster, only then can he eliminate today's humiliation. However, he didn't dare to show his resentment on his face. After hesitating for a while, he had no other choice but to clench his teeth and neutrally say, "I'm sure that you are Nalan family's 3rd young master, Nalan Ziyun. Because that other Nalan Ziyun is a fake, brought in by Nalan Jingze in order to replace that missing child. Apart from Nalan Jingze, only I and the 3rd elder know of this matter." As Nalan Yenming said this, he was also rolling around on the floor due to the pain. As he was rolling around, black blood continually leaked out of the wound on his body. Seeing this scene, it was evident that the intoxicated blood poison in his body had completely broke out. 1. Jiutian Xuannu is a fairy in Chinese mythology. Here is her Wikipedia page. Chapter 346. Where did he truly go? Save me. Quickly save me. I am Nalan family's great elder, I'm the only one who can bring you back to Nalan family. I'm the only one who can get you to recognize your ancestors. Do you hear me? Quickly save me. If you want to blame something, then blame the fact that you're Nalan family's people." Heshi coldly chuckled. Nobody knew when another bottle appeared in her hands, but she lightly sprinkled the medicine out. Immediately, Nalan Yenming's shrieks became fiercer and his body was unable to keep rolling, he was only able to lie on the floor and twitch. The wound on his body burst open and black blood and pus sprayed everywhere. In the blink of an eye, a puddle of blood formed. Whilst Heshi was sprinkling her medicine on Nalan Yenming, Nan Gongyu had long separated the crowd from Nalan Yenming. At this moment, he saw that even Nalan Yenming's skeleton was gone. However, Heshi's gaze was filled with deep concentration. He thought that Heshi was grieving and couldn't help but walk up to Heshi, taking her into his arms and hugging her closely. Softly saying, "No matter what type of person you are or what sort of identity you have, in my heart, you are still my Shi'er. You are still my Wangfei." Heshi was distracted for a while. By the time she realized that this fellow was comforting her, she couldn't help but feel as if it's simultaneously somewhat funny and moving. Shaking her head, regarding Nalan family's people, as far as I'm concerned, they're just insignificant strangers to me. How can I be affected by their matters, life or death? I was merely thinking about Nalan Ziyun. Heshi's only impression on Nalan Ziyun, this younger brother, was from when she was merely 5 years old. At that time, they were still living in the small courtyard, mutually dependent for life. However, when Nalan Heshi was 5, she fell ill with a fever. After she woke up, she never saw her younger brother again. Wet Nurse Chen had told her, Nalan Manor's people had taken her younger brother away. The previous Nalan Heshi had gone to Nalan Manor to inquire about this matter. But it was never disclosed to her that her younger brother wasn't even in Nalan Manor anymore. In fact, he was sent away to study in a sect. Time flies, and in the blink of an eye, 10 or so odd years had passed. Nalan Heshi had already given up on seeing her little brother again. However, that doesn't mean she doesn't miss him. This was actually one of Nalan Heshi's last desires before she died. She wishes to confirm that her younger brother has lived well. Now Nalan Yenming told her that the third young master, Nalan Ziyun, studying at the sect was fake. Then where did he truly go? Even if Nalan Ziyun died at the age of 5, nobody would have pursued the matter. Why did Nalan Zhengze still bring out a fake Nalan Ziyun? After listening to Heshi's words, he knew that she wasn't grieving, and Nan Gongyu let out a breath. Lightly stroking her hair, "You can rest assured, I'll send people to go investigate Nalan Ziyun." Heshi nodded her head and was just about to speak when she suddenly heard the sound of something plopping coming from within the medicinal field. Soon after, a flash of purple also appeared. Dan and the purple abyss vine, who were originally wreaking havoc inside the medicinal field, had returned into her space. Heshi didn't enter the space and could only watch as Dan's whole body was enveloped in a spiritual aura. His small stomach was perfectly round and he seemed to have finally eaten enough. Heshi suddenly felt as if she didn't know whether to laugh or cry, scolding him, "Little Chowhound." But before she could put her heart down, purple abyss vine energetically came up and its anxious thoughts were felt by Heshi. The purple abyss vine was apparently very uneasy and fretful. However, it had no way to clearly express what it felt uneasy about. Heshi was puzzled when suddenly a strong wave of spiritual force burst out from inside the medicinal field. Mutually dependent for life, to rely on one another for survival. Chapter 347 Completely healed. Immediately after, a dazzling white light beam descended from the sky. Along with the beam came an immense force of spiritual power pushing down on the medicinal field. When the beam of light made contact, it quickly spread. In the blink of an eye, it covered every inch of the ground in the medicinal field. To add on to that, all the warriors standing in the middle of the light beam seemed to be isolated from everyone else. They seemed to have become invisible, nobody could see or hear them anymore. Everyone couldn't help but panic. Most of all, this group of people who just experienced the impact of intoxicated blood poison. At this moment, their hearts were filled with fear of the unknown. Nan Gongyu's response quickly covered Heshi and Qing Long with his void spiritual barrier. Wu Yu waited for everyone else to be enveloped. However, just as he was about to pull Heshi into his embrace, a green beam quickly shot towards Heshi. For a moment, Heshi didn't even process what had happened. She only felt a boom in her head, and following that, everything in front of her eyes changed. After returning back to her soul, Heshi found herself in both an unfamiliar yet familiar place. She said it was familiar because this was the place she had met the little golden dragon and lifted its seal. She said it was unfamiliar because this originally dusky and narrow space had undergone some large changes. The whole space had become gold and jade in glorious splendor, too. There were countless night pearls hanging from the ceiling, giving off a soft yet bright light. Originally, there were fuzzy mirrors all around, but now, they all seemed clear. The mirror showed the scene inside the secret territory, including Nan Gongyu and everyone else's images. However, Currently, the images in the mirror were all frozen, as if time had completely stopped in the secret territory. There was suspicion in Heshi's heart. She secretly thought, could it be that because the little golden dragon ate the divine dragon fruit and woke up, bringing her back to his original nest? At this moment, she heard the little golden dragon's old and decrepit voice. Woman, at least one can say you have a good heart. You know that Benzong, 3, got such an injury in order to save you, so you obtained the divine dragon fruit for Benzong. At least Benzong's efforts in Zijin Palace weren't wasted. After that was said, a very small gold dragon sitting on a pink cloud came down in front of Heshi. It seems that the little golden dragon had completely healed by now, the golden scales on his body were glistening. Along with his body's originally thumb-sized width got wider. However, the cotton candy-like pink cloud he was riding on, when matched with his tiny body, didn't match the fact that he was the noble and mighty golden dragon. Heshi restrained herself from smiling. At least your scales resemble a dragon's now, unlike before when someone could have mistaken you as a snake. The little golden dragon suddenly became angry at Heshi, pointing at her and cursing incessantly. Heshi suddenly got rid of her teasing tone. No matter what, thank you for protecting Dan Dan at Zijin Palace, and thank you for protecting me too. The little golden dragon's scolding stopped and coldly snorted. This still isn't good enough. Heshi didn't mind his arrogant character and changed the subject. As long as you're good, then it's good. Why did you suddenly bring me back to this room? What of this matter of me bringing you back? Having heard what was said, the little golden dragon raised its voice. It's clearly you who triggered the secret territories restriction, starting the transfer of the secret territories controlling right. 1. After returning back to her soul. In this case, Heshi didn't actually leave her soul, she just returned from La La Land. 2. Gold and jade in glorious splendor, a dazzling sight. 3. Benzong, literally translates as, this senior. Chapter 348 Heaven-defying luck. The little golden dragon's words alarmed Heshi. The secret territories controlling right? How could this be? After becoming the descendant of Zijin Palace, the sealed dragon territory was already considered hers. But, the information left by the original master of Zijin Palace did pass on information saying that obtaining the controlling right over the secret territory wasn't an easy task. Even if the secret territory closes, she still may not obtain it. Heshi originally didn't hold much hope. When she was in the 100 Herb Mist, she clearly didn't do much. So how did she still obtain the controlling right to the secret territory? The little golden dragon raised his head, groaning. Even if I don't want to admit it, but you, woman, still have some abilities. Although you can't be compared to my previous master, but to let me reluctantly admit this to you isn't an impossible thing. Having said this, the little golden dragon pointed at the floor and lowered its voice. If you want to obtain control over sealed dragon domain's secret territory, then, first, you must have remarkable talent and willpower. You were already verified when you inherited the Zijin Palace. Second, you need to go through and collect the 5 heavenly spiritual treasures from Greenwood Realm, Water Moon Realm, Burning Heaven Realm, Ice Snow Realm, and Desolate Desert Realm in order to prove that you've mastered the strength of the secret territory. Originally, this is extremely hard to accomplish. However, who could have thought that you saved so many people, and by an accident arising from many causes, 1, you managed to get all 5 of the secret territory's heavenly spiritual treasures. However, having just these treasures isn't enough. You have to be able to condense enough spiritual power to touch the secret territory's restriction barrier. In fact, this can only be done by gold core stage and above martial artists. However, due to the fact that, just now, Dan Dan and your purple abyss vine ate so many magical plants, it was just enough to touch the secret territory's restriction barrier. Although the little golden dragon was disoriented at the time, due to his contract with Heshi, he was still able to clearly see everything outside the space. Even he had to sigh, this little girl has a formidable amount of strength and potential. In addition, she also had luck that defied the heavens. Requirements which were supposed to be difficult to accomplish was, unexpectedly, easily attained by her. Thinking up to here, the little golden dragon coldly snorted and flew higher up. Keeping his arrogant character, he coldly said, "And of course, the most important point is that you must be able to become the master Benzin has genuinely approved of. That means that I must willingly enter a life and death blood contract with you, which can't be reversed, not the originally dispensable contract we had. By becoming Benzin's genuine master, to obtain my whole heart's willing approval, only then can you become the secret territory's true master." As soon as the little golden dragon said this, it swooped down, and when it neared the side of Heshi's neck, it firmly bit down. For a while Heshi didn't see anything, she didn't have enough time to dodge, she only felt the pain in her neck. Soon after, a gold-colored beam enveloped both her and the little golden dragon. Moments later, the golden beam scattered and the wound on Heshi's neck disappeared without a trace. However, the golden mark of a dragon appeared on the hollow of her palm. This golden mark was completely different from the gold lines she received when she and the little golden dragon initially drew their contract. This mark was incomparably clear, it seemed to have gone deep into her flesh. It also held a faint feeling of great power. Although the golden dragon mark quickly disappeared from Heshi's palm, she was still able to clearly sense it. It seemed as if there was a strange memory, that didn't belong to her, burned into her mind. Heshi knew that these memories were part of the dragon race's inheritance. But, now, these memories were fuzzy and she was only able to see one sentence clearly, one, by an accident arising from many causes, a freak combination of facts. Chapter 349 The best timing through blood, to serve as my brand, abandon hatred, forget glory, thousands of generations, never betraying. May the dragon race's glory from millions of years prior, one day appear again. Heshi didn't understand much of what this sentence meant, but strangely enough, she could sense the sorrow, despair, and hope contained within the words. And at this moment, under the soles of her feet, a brilliant light suddenly started brightly shining. Just now, Heshi discovered that the design engraved on the floor of the room resembled a pentagram. Each of the 5 angles of the pentagram was perfectly aligned with one of the mirrors while she stood in the center of the pentagram. The entire pentagram was lit up and Heshi felt as if the mirrors were all flying towards her. Soon after, she was able to clearly see every nook and cranny inside the secret territory. The little golden dragon's proud voice and mischievous laughter was soon heard. When the controlling right of the secret territory is handed over, the entire secret territory is in a completely static state. This includes all the magical beasts and martial artists currently inside the secret territory. In the entire sealed dragon domain, only you and I are able to move, although this period of time is short. Moreover, later on, even if you are in control of the secret territory, you won't be able to replicate this again. The most you can do is drive the people you dislike out of the secret territory. But now, during this time, no matter what you wish to do, these people are completely unable to resist. Once Heshi heard these words, a weird smile appeared on her face. The little golden dragon's words weren't wrong, this truly was the best timing. Especially at this moment. Heshi already spotted the frozen figures of Feng Yunjing and Feng Lianing. They were currently next to a stream of spring water in the ice-snow realm. Several disciples from Luli's sect were currently in the process of preparing to remove a nearby tiny tree. Having just received control of the secret territory, naturally, Heshi also knew of each inch of soil and treasure inside the secret territory. She knew that this stream was called the spiritual spring stream and that tree was the spring tree. That tree was one of 3 of Miluo continent's great tree deities. Every 200 years, a liquid called Heaven's Alcohol will flow out from the spiritual spring tree's roots. When mixed with the spring water, a small puddle of spiritual spring stream will form. In Miluo continent, the Feng family was currently like the sun at noon. In addition to the fact that their skills were more talented than those of ordinary individuals, the Feng family also had a group of high-level alchemists. The pills refined by these alchemists were able to allow the children of Feng family to advance by leaps and bounds. However, it's not without harm if someone takes the pills for a long time. No matter how pure and perfect the pill was, each pill contained quantities of an individual medicine. These individual medicines would accumulate and made it easy for martial artists to go overboard when being promoted. According to research done by ancestors of Feng family, this spiritual spring tree was able to dissolve this individual medicine. Therefore, Feng Yunjing was determined to get this tree. Furthermore, this tree was difficult to locate inside the ice-snow realm. Seeing this scene, Heshi couldn't help but smile. Luckily for her, the time she received the inheritance was very good. Otherwise, Feng Yunjing would be able to take away this spiritual spring tree. Although she didn't value the tree as rare, when she thought about her enemy getting good things, she felt unhappy. To the side, the little golden dragon's mouth twitched. Unfortunately, although this standstill of time is powerful, there are some restrictions. You can't touch the bodies of martial artists. Otherwise, boss, you are the knife that erased that slut. Isn't that just death ending all your troubles? Chapter 350. Slowly settling accounts. Heshi softly smiled. To erase her with a knife, isn't that too cheap of a fate for Feng Lianing? Rest assured, my patience is very good. What we have is time. I'll slowly settle my accounts with her. Seeing that the time left for the people to remain frozen was almost up, Heshi no longer hesitated. She quickly began to manipulate the people inside the secret territory. Although she couldn't directly touch the people inside the secret territory, she could move them around. The storage items that were stored inside the storage rings that the martial artists carried around were hard for her to take. However, the charms they wore on the outside or held in their hands, she kindly took, as if they were being offered to her. Heshi's mouth picked up into a sinister smile. Looking around, she quickly made up her mind. After Feng Yunjing and his party left the Greenwood realm, they quickly found the spiritual spring tree by following the secret method that Feng family's elder alchemist provided. But there were 7 rank 5 magical beasts guarding the spiritual spring tree. Each rank 5 magical beast was equivalent to gold core stage cultivation. Feng Yunjing, Feng Lianing, and disciples of the Luli sect wasted a lot of labor in order to completely defeat these 7 rank 5 magical beasts. Seeing that the spiritual spring tree was so close, Feng Yunjing's eyes flashed with something. As long as he was able to obtain this tree, the danger of taking so many pills would be eliminated. Then, Feng family would be able to stand at the summit of Miluo continent. From now on, nobody on this earth would be able to fight or obstruct him. Everything he wanted, every person he wanted, he would be able to easily grasp in the palm of his hand. Everybody was filled with excitement. They were so excited that they didn't even bother to clean up the 7 rank 5 magical beasts. They took out a 9th level spiritual shovel and prepared to move the spiritual spring tree. But after a quarter of an hour, something occurred that shocked Feng Yunjing. His hand just touched one of the leaves on the spiritual spring tree before he felt the sky spin and the earth go round. When he opened his eyes, the scenery before his eyes had completely changed. The sounds of the magical beasts' roars sounded in the air, rising and falling one after another. What stood in front of them wasn't 7 rank 5 magical beasts anymore, instead hundreds of thousands of magical spirit beasts surrounded them. These magical beasts contained 3 rank 4 magical beasts, some rank 5 and even one at rank 6. Not only that, but they were no longer located in front of the spiritual spring tree. Instead, they found themselves in a desolate desert. Feng Yunjing's face changed. He was just about to use the weapon he carried to resist the magical beasts. But he was stunned to find that the weapon that was originally in his palm had, at some unknown point, disappeared. As it turns out, Feng Lianing, Nia Jinchen, and the rest of the disciples of Luli's sect found themselves in a similar situation. Feng Lianing had long since already been scared stupid by the magical beast's roars and the weapon in her hand had also disappeared. She was so panicked, she found that she didn't have enough time to take out another weapon from her storage ring before a magical beast snarled and pounced towards her. Ah! 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 I don't want to die. Feng Lianing shrieked and ruthlessly pulled a disciple of Lu Li's sect to stand in front of her. Only a tearing sound was heard as the disciple was horribly torn apart. The Lu Li sect disciple didn't even have time to groan before they became a pool of flesh. Nie Jinchen also found himself caught off guard, and to add on to the fact, he was caught off guard by a rank 5 magical beast. He was terrified. Noticing what Feng Lianing did, he also instinctively pulled 2 Lu Li sect disciples in front of him. Feng Yunjing's cultivation level was higher than those two, therefore he was able to take out a new weapon and kill in all directions. However, the number of magical beasts in front of them was too high and the bodies of these few people all contained the scent of the spiritual spring tree, causing the magical beasts became extremely excited. Even Feng Yunjing was unable to make them fearfully withdraw. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.